Tim Pigott-Smith as Biggles in Biggles Flies East by Captain W.E. Johns. The story is told by Richard Bebb. Captain James Bigglesworth, RFC, home from France on 10 days' leave, stopped at the corner of Lower Regent Street and went into the Caprice restaurant, the favourite rendezvous of RFC officers in London. He selected a small table in a secluded corner and was engrossed in the task of choosing his lunch when he became conscious of the fact that someone was settling in the chair opposite. There was nothing very unusual in the stranger, of average height and build, just over military age, possibly a war profiteer. But it was his eyes that held Biggles and sent a curious prickling sensation down his spine. Pale blue and partly hidden behind large tortoiseshell glasses, they held a glint that boded ill for anyone who stood in his path. Biggles felt an unusual twinge of apprehension.
Good morning, Captain Brunau.
I'm sorry, but you're making a mistake. My name isn't Brunau.
No, of course not. I quite understand. In the circumstances, the sooner a name like that is forgotten, the better, eh?
Are you suggesting that I don't know my own name?
Look, don't let us waste time arguing about trivialities. My purpose is to help you. My name, by the way, is Biggles. Ernest Biggles.
Just a minute. You seem to be difficult to convince. I've told you that my name isn't Brunau. You say yours is Biggles. As far as I'm concerned, it can be Dogface, Hogface, or even Frogface. I have made myself clear? Thank you. Good morning.
Listen, Brunau, I know who you are and why you're not in uniform. I know the service has outed you, so what about earning some easy money working for people who will appreciate you?
Biggles folded the menu and laid it on the table.
I see. Perhaps it would...
Exactly. I shall be back here at 6:30. The place will be empty then. Good day to you.
Biggles sat quite still for some minutes after he'd gone, then went to the buffet, where he met Ludgate of 287 Squadron, whom he knew well.
Hello, Lud. Ever hear of a chap named Brunau?
Oh, good gracious, yes. He's been slung out of the service on his ear. I believe he was hauled up on a charge of conduct unbecoming an officer and gentleman. I was at training school with him.
Was he anything like me, in appearance?
A bit. Not so much, though, that anyone knowing you would make a mistake.
I see. Thanks, laddie. See you later.
Biggles strode briskly along to the Strand, where he turned sharply into the Hotel Cecil, the headquarters of the Air Board. At length he found himself outside a door on which was printed Air Staff Intelligence, Major L. Brindale. He tapped on the door and, invited to enter, found himself facing a worried-looking officer at a desk littered with correspondence and memo sheets.
I'm Captain Bigglesworth of 266 Squadron, home on leave, sir.
Why are you not in uniform?
I could explain that, sir, but I have something else to tell you that I think you should know.
Briefly, he told them about his recent encounter in the restaurant and described Biggles to the best of his ability.
Have you seen this fellow before today?
Never, sir.
You know about the Brunau affair, I suppose?
Yes, sir.
Yes, this may lead to something, or it may not, but we should follow it up. Bigglesworth, you will be posted to this department for special duty forthwith. Try to get inside this fellow's confidence. Find out what he's up to, and report back here tomorrow. Meet him tonight, as he suggests.
Very good, sir.
And, I think it would be wise if you employed the next few hours making yourself thoroughly acquainted with Brunau's history, so that you can assume his identity if necessary. I'll give you his dossier.
At 10:30 the following morning, Biggles was ushered by Major Brindale into the spacious office of Brigadier General Sir Malcolm Pendersby. The General glanced up as he entered.
Well, Bigglesworth, sit down. What happened yesterday? Did the fellow turn up?
He did, sir.
Tell me what happened.
Well, to tell the truth, sir, it isn't easy. It seemed to me that Biggles was being very careful. His conversation consisted chiefly of hints and suggestions, but if I may judge, the position is that Biggles thinks I am Brunau. He knows Brunau has been cashiered and is of Austrian extraction, so his sympathies may be with Germany and the Central Powers. He is working on the assumption that Brunau's disgrace has embittered him against the British and might be induced to turn traitor. but it struck me that Broglace dare not risk going too far in case he was making a mistake. So I told him in a half-hearted sort of way that there was nothing doing, but at the same time try to create the impression that I might be persuaded if it was made worth my while.
Excellent. Go on.
Well, that's all, sir. Naturally, I didn't want to lose touch with him, so I've made a provisional appointment.
Ah. Now, Bigglesworth, I'm going to have a very serious talk with you. I believe that Broglace's next move will be to make a definite offer to you, provided you do not give him cause for alarm. If my assumption is correct, he will suggest, tentatively, that you work for him, which means, of course, for Germany. I would like you to accept that offer.
Accept it? You mean, sir, that you would like me to become a German spy working for the British?
Without mincing matters, that's precisely what I do mean. I'm asking you to volunteer for what may prove a very dangerous task. I've looked up your record, and Major Raymond, the intelligence officer attached to your wing in France, speaks highly of your ability. Frankly, to handle an affair of this sort with any hope of success would be beyond the ability of the average officer. Still, the final decision must be left to you, and I should fail in my duty if I tried to minimize the risks. Well, how do you feel about it?
Put that way, sir, I cannot very well refuse.
A few days later, Lieutenant Algernon Lacey of 266 Squadron, stationed at Marinique, France, acting flight commander in the absence of Biggles, his friend and flying partner, walked towards the flimsy weatherboard building where Major Mullen, his CO, had his office.
Ah, come in, Lacey, come in. I was waiting to have a word with you, although I'm afraid it's bad news.
How do you mean, sir?
You've been posted to headquarters Middle East in Cairo.
What? Cairo?
I'm sorry, Lacey. I hate losing a good officer. But the Air Board is not in the habit of explaining its actions. You're posted with effect from today.
Ridiculous. Just wait till Biggles gets back. He'll have something to say about it.
Aye, well, Biggles is not coming back.
Not coming back? Suffering rattlesnakes.
Biggles is posted to HE.
Home establishment. Fancy posting a man like Biggles to HE. Does the Air Board imagine that fighters like Biggles grow on gooseberry bushes? Will that be all, sir?
Yes, Lacey, you may go. Oh, by the way, you'll have a travelling companion.
Who is it?
Major Raymond of Wing Headquarters. He's also been posted to Headquarters Middle East.
Good. I shall be able to tell him what I think of the Air Board.
10 days later, tired and travel-stained, Algy stepped out of a service tender at Kantara Aerodrome, Palestine. He swung round as he heard his name called. Major Raymond, in khaki drill uniform, was walking briskly towards him. "Hello, Lacey. So we meet again."
Hello, sir. Why couldn't they have sent us along together, I wonder?
"I had to attend a conference in Cairo, but I got here first because I flew up. You tired?"
Not particularly, sir. Why?
"Because I want you to meet somebody, and it's rather urgent."
Good enough, sir.
The Major led the way to his headquarters, a large square tent, and swung aside the canvas flap that served as a door. The tent was furnished as an office, with desk, telephone, and filing cabinets. But Algy noticed none of these things. He was staring at a man dressed in flying overalls who walked quickly towards him, laughing at his thunderstruck expression. "I don't think an introduction is necessary."
Biggles! Why the... What the dickens? Oh, great Scott, this has got me beaten to a frazzle.
"Oh, let's sit down. It's too hot to stand. Bigglesworth, you better do the talking."
I'll tell you all I know.
Briefly, he told them of his encounter with Broglace and his subsequent conference at the Air Board.
You see, I realized that it was up to everyone to do his best. I hated the idea, but what could I do? In the end, I told the General that I would go on with the business on the understanding that no one knew except himself, and 2 persons I should name. The idea being that those 2 persons should act as liaison officers with me. The General agreed, and when I named you 2, he was pleased because, as he said, you, Algy, would be valuable because you fly, and you, sir, because you were already on the intelligence staff. Now you know why you were posted. I saw Broglace that evening, and he made me an offer of high wages if I would join the German Secret Service. I said I'd think it over and went back to the General, who told me to accept, but if possible, to get to this part of the world, where the war was going to pieces as far as we were concerned, due chiefly to the activities of a German spy named El Sharif. Our people only know him by his Arab name. They badly want to get a slant on him, and that was to be my job. They suggested that if I got here, I should get in touch with our leading intelligence agent, Major Stern. He's a freelance and tears about the desert on camel or horseback, pulling the wires through Arab chiefs and tribesmen. El Sharif and Stern are the two big noises out here, apparently, and have been trying to get at the other's throat for months. Well, I saw Broglace and told him I was prepared to fall in line with him. He asked me to which theatre of war I would prefer to go. I told him Palestine, and that was that.
Well, how did you get out here?
That would make a story in itself. Broglace gave me a signet ring with a hinged flap that covered a peculiar device, and told me it would work like an oracle. It did. I'd flown home on leave, as you know, so I got my machine and instead of flying to France, went straight to Brussels. As soon as I landed, I was taken prisoner. But I flashed my ring, and it acted like a charm. I was pushed into a train for Berlin, then I was sent on to Jerusalem, where I reported to the intelligence people, who posted me to Zabala, under Count von Faubourg, who is OC of the German Secret Service on this particular sector of the front. I got there 2 days ago, and was sent out on a reconnaissance this morning to get my general bearings.
But how on earth did you manage to land on our side of the lines in a Hun machine?
I'm flying a British machine, a Bristol fighter. The Huns have 2 of our machines, a 2-seater, the Bristol, and a Sopwith pup. They must have force-landed over the wrong side of the lines or something. I fancy the German idea is that I shall land over there and take back any information I pick up. That's why I'm still wearing a British uniform, although I have a German one as well. Anyway, I slipped over right away to try to get in touch with you in order that we could make some sort of plan and fix a rendezvous where we could meet when I have anything to report. As a temporary measure, I've decided on the oasis of Abba Sud. It's well out in the desert, a good way from either British or German forces, so it should be safe.
He crossed over to a large wall map that hung on the side of the tent and laid his finger on a small circle that bore the name Abba Sud.
Algy, I want you to hang around there as often as you can and watch for me. I may be flying a British machine or a German, and in either case, I'll try to fire a red very light to let you know it's me. Then we'll land, talk things over, and you can report to Major Raymond. Now I must go. We're in touch, and that's a load off my mind. We can settle details later.
He rose to his feet, fastened his overalls, and held out his hand.
Goodbye for the present, sir. Cheerio, Algy.
For God's sake, be careful.
As Biggles walked swiftly towards his machine, he paused in his stride to admire a beautifully mounted Arab who swept past him, galloping towards the camp.
Who's that?
A flight sergeant glanced up.
Oh, that's Major Stern, sir, coming in from one of his raids. He's always popping up when he's least expected.
Biggles, deep in thought, made his way to his machine and climbed into the cockpit. The engine roared, he raced like an arrow over the sand, and then swept upwards into the blue sky, turning in a wide circle towards the German lines and Zabala. Zabala, besides being the headquarters of the German intelligence staff, was the station of 2 German squadrons, one of single-seater Falz-Scouts and the other of 2-seater Halberstadts. Despite being surrounded by the field-grey uniforms of the enemy, Biggles felt fairly confident there. But for Hauptmann von Stahlhain, he would have been almost at ease. Of all the Germans he had met, none filled him with the same indefinable dread as von Stahlhain, Count von Faubourg's chief of staff. The Count himself was simply a rather coarse old man who had achieved his rank more by unscrupulous cunning than by mental qualifications. The German flying officers had much in common with British flying officers, with the exception of Karl Leffens, to whom he'd taken a dislike on account of his overbearing manner, a dislike that had obviously been mutual. Erich von Stahlhain was in a very different category. There was a grim relentlessness about his manner that told Biggles that he was a man to be feared. Wounded early in the war, he walked with a permanent limp with the aid of 2 sticks, and was tall, dark, with cold, brooding eyes that held a steel-like quality that the monocle he habitually wore couldn't dispel. Such was Hauptmann Erich von Stahlhain, and Biggles sensed a latent hostility from the first moment that they'd met, almost as if the man suspected him of being an impostor. Biggles noticed that all the Germans engaged in intelligence work wore a signet ring, like the one that had been given to him by Brogles. It appeared to be a kind of identification symbol. The Count wore one, as did von Stahlheim and Leffens. His own, when opened, displayed a tiny dagger suspended over a double-headed eagle, with a small number 117 engraved below. Of El Sharif, he'd seen no sign. Not that he expected to. The name was almost a legend. He could only keep his ears and eyes open and wait for some clue that might lead to the identification of the German super spy. Biggles reached Zabala without incident, and after making a neat landing, taxied into the hangar that had been reserved for the captured British machines, and went to his quarters, where he changed into his German uniform. Then he made his way to the officers' mess. He'd not been seated many minutes when an orderly handed him a note from the Count requesting his presence at the headquarters office immediately, in the old Turkish fort that served both as headquarters and sleeping quarters for the senior officers. He knocked at the door and entered. Count von Faubourg was leaning back in his chair with the collar of his tunic unfastened, in conversation with von Stahlheim, who half sat on the desk with a mocking expression on his face.
So, here you are, Brunner. You went out flying this morning, yes?
I did, sir, acting under your instructions.
Why did you land behind the British lines?
Because I thought it would be a good thing to ascertain immediately if such landings could be made with impunity.
I see. And is that why you visited the headquarters tent of the British Intelligence Service?
No, sir, I had no choice in that matter. I was sent for. The officer who sent for me wanted to know if I was going to Heliopolis, as I had a personal message for someone stationed there. I told him I was sorry, but I was not going near Heliopolis, and the matter ended there, and I came back.
Who was the other officer with Major Raymond?
The words reacted on Biggles' tense nerves like an electric shock. He answered with all the nonchalance he could muster.
I've no idea, sir. I saw another officer there, a young fellow, but I didn't pay any particular attention to him. I was told to report to Major Raymond. That's how I knew his name.
Have you ever seen him before?
Not to my knowledge.
He didn't recognize you.
Oh, no, sir. At least, I have no reason to suppose he did. He was quite friendly.
The answer apparently satisfied the Count, but von Stahlheim was still watching Biggles with a puzzled smile, and continued to do so until the Count told him that he might return to his quarters. The following morning his presence was again demanded by Count von Faubourg. As he entered the office, he instinctively looked round for von Stahlheim, but, to his infinite relief, he was not there. The Count seemed to be quite affable.
Good morning, Brunner. I have a real job for you at last.
Thank you, sir.
We have received word that a large body of British troops, chiefly Australian cavalry, recently left Egypt and have been disembarked and concealed somewhere behind this particular front in readiness for a big push. It is most likely that they are somewhere in the hills. I want you to try to find them. Take one of the British machines, then you will not be molested. If you cannot find the camp from the air, land and make discreet inquiries.
Biggles returned to his quarters, put on his British uniform and his overalls, and ordered the mechanics to get out the Sopwith pup. He saw a silver and blue Pfalz Scout climb swiftly into the shimmering haze that hung over the sandy aerodrome.
That's Leffen's machine. I wonder what job he's on.
He climbed into his cockpit and started the engine. But his interest in Leffens waned as he sped towards the British lines.
I'd better get to Raymond and ask his advice. It's out of the question for me to report the position of our troops, yet to report failure or an incorrect position would be to court disaster.
As soon as he cleared Zabala on the course set by von Faubourg, he turned north towards the oasis of Abba Sud. By firing a green very light, the friendly signal arranged by German HQ, he kept German Archie guns away. And the white bar on his top plane, which acted as identification, protected him from prowling German scout aircraft. Eventually, in an empty sky, he arrived at his destination and flew over the oasis, searching the sky in all directions. But there was no sign of Algy. He was about to turn away when a very light curved upwards in a wide arc. Staring downward, he made out an aeroplane bearing the familiar red, white and blue marking, standing in the shade of the palms that formed the oasis. With a sigh of relief, he began to drop down towards the stationary aeroplane. On landing, he saw two figures detach themselves from the shadows and walk towards him. And when he identified them as Algy and Major Raymond, he switched off and hurried to meet them.
Hello, Biggles. Had an idea you'd be over today. How are things going?
They're not going at all. I'm supposed to be looking for this fellow El Sharif, but I haven't the remotest idea of where to begin, and I'm scared stiff of making a mistake. Do you know that by the time I got back yesterday, the Germans knew I'd been to see you?
Impossible.
That's what I should have said. But I don't mind telling you that I could almost hear the firing party when the Count pushed the accusation at me. But I lied and got away with it. I hate this spy game. Nobody tells the truth.
No, it's part of the game, Bigglesworth. What excuse have you made for getting away this morning?
No excuse was necessary. I've been sent out on a job. That's why I'm glad to see you. I've got to tell them the position of the Australian reinforcements you brought from Egypt.
That's a problem. How they knew about these reinforcements is more than I can imagine. By Jove, there is a way.
I'm glad to hear that.
The Australian troops are leaving Sidi Arish tonight for the support trenches. Report their position in Sidi Arish when you get back, and it'll be quite safe. Von Faubourg will send a photographic machine through, and he'll see that you're correct. The chances are that he'll launch a bomb raid tonight after midnight, by which time the Australians will have gone. You'll consolidate your position with von Faubourg, and the Huns will waste a few tons of bombs.
Fine. We couldn't have planned a better situation. Algy, I've been wondering how you could get a message through to me in case of emergency, and there's only one way that I can think of. Behind our aerodrome at Zabala, there's a large olive grove. You could fly over low at night and drop a non-committal message, cutting your engine twice in quick succession as a signal to let me know that you've done it.
It sounds desperate.
Yes, but it's a good idea. I've only one more thing to say. You won't like it, Bigglesworth, but an idea has just been put up by HQ. German troops along a wide sector of this front get their water by a pipeline that is fed from the reservoir just north of your aerodrome.
I've noticed that.
Blow it up.
You're not serious, sir?
My dear Bigglesworth, we're at war. The Germans won't die of thirst. They'll merely be seriously inconvenienced.
It sounds a tall order to me.
I can supply you with a small but powerful bomb. I brought it with me. Conceal it in your machine, and when you get back, hide it in a safe place until you're ready to use it. Then all you'll have to do will be to touch off the time fuse, set, say, for half an hour, and return to your quarters. That's all.
All right, sir. I'll see what I can do.
A small, heavy square box was transferred from Algy's plane to the underseat pocket of the pup, and Biggles prepared to take his departure.
It's going to be jolly awkward if the Huns want me to collect information. I wish you could arrange for some dummy camps or aerodromes to be put up so that I can report. Hello? What's that?
A tiny aeroplane, looking like a silver and blue hummingbird, flashed in the sun, turned, and then raced nose down towards them. Biggles recognized the machine instantly and understood exactly what had happened.
It's Leffens. The cunning devils followed me. He spotted me talking to you. Swing my prop, Algy! Quick!
He leapt into the cockpit of the pup as the silver and blue Pfalz roared overhead, with the pilot hanging over the side, staring at them. The pup engine was still hot, and within seconds it was racing over the sand, leaving a swirling cloud of dust in its wake. Biggles, crouching low in the cockpit, knew instinctively that he'd been followed by Leffens on von Stahlhein's instructions, and Leffens had seen him with British RFC officers. Leffens must not be allowed to return to Zabala. Biggles pulled up the oil pressure handle of his synchronizing gear and fired a short burst to warm his guns. The pup was slightly faster than the Pfalz, and the gap closed between them. Biggles' hand closed over his firing lever, and he sent a stream of bullets down the wake of Leffens' plane, compelling him to turn and fight. With the cold deliberation of long experience, Biggles waited until he saw the stabbing tongues of flame leaping from the Pfalz's Spandau guns. He shoved the joystick forward and roared straight down across the nose of the Black Cross machine, then pulled up in a vertical Immelmann turn, raking the streamlined fuselage with lead. But Leffens was by no means beaten. He whirled round in a lightning turn and sent a stream of tracer bullets in the direction of the pup. Biggles felt them hitting his machine and flinched as he remembered the bomb under his seat, but he didn't turn. The German, unable to face the hail of lead that was shooting his machine to pieces, flung joystick and rudder bar over and spun earthwards. But not for nothing had Biggles fought 100 such combats. He waited with the calculating patience of the experienced air fighter. He saw the first movement of the Pfalz's tail as it pulled out of the spin. With his right hand gripping the firing lever, he leveled out, took the enemy plane in his sights, and as its nose came up, fired. Biggles could hear the crash above the noise of his engine and caught his breath as a cloud of dust rose high into the air. Feeling suddenly limp, the thought occurred to him that the German pilot might not have been killed outright, and the idea of leaving a wounded man in the waterless desert filled him with horror. He landed and hurried towards the shattered remains of the German machine. One glance told him that Karl Leffens was dead. In the wreckage, Biggles caught the gleam of the German's signet ring shining in the sunlight. He stooped, picked it up, and dropped it in his pocket.
Might be useful. One never knows.
Then he saluted his fallen opponent.
Sorry, Leffens, but it was either you or me.
Then, making a mental note to ask Algy to send out a burying party, he took off and returned to Zabala. As he skimmed in over the tarmac, his eyes fell on von Stahlhein, standing alone on the lee side of the special hangar. For Biggles, this was worrying. For on the floor of his cockpit reposed an object that could hardly fail to excite the German's curiosity if he saw it. The explosive charge provided by Major Raymond. Consequently, Biggles deliberately overshot and finished his run on the far side of the aerodrome in a slight dip that would conceal the lower part of his machine from watchers on the tarmac. He reached far over the side of the cockpit and dropped the bomb lightly on the sand. That part of the aerodrome was seldom visited, and the small object would hardly be noticed by a landing pilot. Von Stahlhein was waiting for him outside the hangar when he taxied in.
Where have you been?
I have been making a reconnaissance over the Jebel Tel country. Why?
Did you see anything of Leffens? He was going in that direction.
Yes, I did, and I wish he'd keep away from me in the air. If the British see him hanging about without him attacking, they may wonder why.
The German's eyes never left Biggles' face.
Did you have any trouble?
Nothing to speak of, but I've got an important report to make, so I can't stay talking.
Biggles turned on his heel and walked quickly in the direction of HQ. There was an odd expression on the Count's face as he saw who his visitor was.
Well, what is it?
The Australian troops are hidden among the palms around Sidi Arish, sir.
So, where is Hauptmann von Stahlhein?
On the tarmac, sir.
Ask him to come here at once.
Biggles found von Stahlhein standing by the pup's engine, examining something in his hand, something that he dropped quickly into his pocket when he heard someone coming.
Will you please report to the Count immediately?
Certainly. I shall be glad to. Very glad.
As von Stahlheim limped off, Biggles took a swift pace to where he had been standing. One glance, and he knew what had happened. In the cowling was a small round hole that could only have been made by one thing, a bullet. His heart gave an unpleasant lurch as he realized just what it implied. Then he lifted the cowling and saw what he had feared. In a direct line with the puncture in the cowling, there was another jagged hole in the wooden pattern that divided the engine from the cockpit. But the hole didn't go right through. The bullet must have been stopped by it, in which case it should still be sticking in the stout ash board. But it was not.
He found it, and he's dug it out. He'll know it's a German bullet. I'll have to say that it's always been there. It was probably one of the shots fired by the German who brought the machine down.
He walked to his room, changed, and then strolled into the mess. A word or two of conversation that was going on between a small group of pilots at the bar reached his ears, and a cold shiver ran down his spine as he listened. One of the pilots, who spoke English, detached himself from the group and came towards him.
Have you seen Leffens? Yes, I thought I saw him this morning near Jebel Tel, but I was not absolutely certain. Why? He has not come back. It is very bad. He was making tests of the new bullets that came only yesterday. If he has fell in the British trench, they will know of our new bullets at once, which is very bad for us.
Biggles, desperately worried now, walked over to the window and stared out across the dusty aerodrome.
So Leffens was carrying a new type of bullet, and von Stahlheim has found one of them in my machine. That'll take a bit of explaining.
He saw a two-seater Halberstadt take off with its escorts and head towards the lines.
There goes the photographic machine.
Biggles returned to his quarters. Some time later, an unmistakable dragging stride sounded in the passage. The door was thrown open, and the Count and von Stahlheim stood on the threshold. Von Stahlheim tapped the end of his cigarette with his forefinger to knock off the ash, a curious habit that Biggles had often noticed.
The Chief would like to ask you a question or two.
Come in, I'll do my best to answer.
Through the window, out of the corner of his eye, Biggles saw the Halberstadt and its escorts glide in.
Oh, now, this morning you reported to me that you had located a division of Australian cavalry at Sidi Arish.
I did, sir.
Bruno, the story I told you of the movement of Australian troops was purely imaginary. I merely wish to test your zeal, to find out how you would act in such circumstances. Now, what was your object in rendering a report which you knew quite well was incorrect?
If you doubt my word, sir, may I respectfully request you post me to another command where my services would be more welcome than they are here?
Do you still persist, then, that your report is authentic? Surely. Who is it?
Mayor, Staffel leader of the Halberstadt Squadron. I'm sorry to interrupt you, sir, but I thought you'd better see this photograph without loss of time.
Von Faubourg's mouth opened in surprise, while von Stahlheim threw an extraordinary look in Biggles' direction. Biggles moved nearer and looked at the photograph. It showed a cluster of white, flat-topped houses and waterholes, beyond which were extensive groves of palm trees. Between the palms were long rows of horse lines and clusters of tiny figures, foreshortened to ant-like dimensions. The Count sprang to his feet.
Splendid, Bruno. And you too have done well, Meyer. Come on, von Stahlheim, we must attend to this. We've no time for anything else now.
Biggles remained in his quarters until the soft purple twilight of the desert enfolded the aerodrome, then crossed to the open window and looked out. Without haste, he donned his German uniform and dropped silently onto the sand. His first move, he knew, must be to retrieve the bomb before the moon rose. In spite of the fact that he'd marked the place down very carefully, it took him a quarter of an hour to find the bomb. And he'd just picked it up when a slight sound caused him to spread eagle himself flat on the sandy earth. It was the faint chink of one pebble striking against another. He lay as still as death and waited. The sound came nearer, and then a soft pad of footsteps. He looked round desperately for a hiding place. A few yards away there was a small, wind-scorched camel-thorn bush, and he slithered towards it like a serpent. As he settled himself behind it, a figure loomed up in the darkness. It was an Arab in flowing burnous and turban, obviously moving with a fixed purpose, for he strode along with a swinging stride and disappeared into the darkness. Something familiar about that lithe figure stirred some half-forgotten chord in his memory, but he couldn't wait to ponder over the strange occurrence, so, with the bomb in his pocket, he set off swiftly. He'd almost reached his destination when an aero engine opened up on the far side of the aerodrome, almost at the very spot where he'd just been. Within seconds, he could make out the broad wings of an aeroplane disappearing into the starlit sky. He watched it, mystified, for it almost looked as if the Arab he had seen had taken off. He looked about him. No one was about. So, holding the bomb close to his side, he hurried back to his quarters. He reached his room without incident and glanced at his watch. He had exactly 1 hour and 10 minutes to complete his task and get back to the mess before dinner, when he would have to be present, or his absence would have been remarked upon. He picked up the box, opened it, and took out the metal cylinder. Down one side was a graduated gauge, marked in minutes. On the top was a small red plunger, which carried a warning to the effect that the bomb would commence to operate from the moment it was depressed. Not without some nervousness, he screwed the gauge to its limit, which was 30 minutes, and replaced the bomb in its box. Then, leaving the light still burning, he set off for the hill on which the reservoir was situated, half a mile away. Once there, he took the bomb from its case, forced the plunger home, and thrust it into the cavity in the side of the reservoir. Then he set off rapidly down the hill, just as the cloud drifted over the face of the moon. He was making his way towards his quarters when he heard the sound of wind singing in the wires of a gliding aeroplane that was coming into land. Biggles paused to see who was flying in such strange conditions. The plane taxied in, and he saw Meyer climb out of the front seat of the machine, a Halberstadt, and stroll round to the tail unit to examine the rudder as if it wasn't working properly. There appeared to be no passengers, so without any further loss of time, Biggles went to his room, washed, brushed his clothes, and then went along to the dining room. It was 5 minutes to 8. Dinner would be served in 5 minutes, and 1 minute later, if the bomb was timed accurately, the reservoir would blow up. Several of the pilots were in semi-flying kit. He gathered they'd been detailed for a bombing raid, which was to leave the ground shortly before midnight.
Going to bomb the palm trees at Sidi Arish. Well, Hold on, what's that?
Biggles recognized the deep, mellow drone of a British machine coming towards the camp, probably an FE-2D. So did the German pilots. As the plane got over the aerodrome, its engine cut out, picked up, cut again, and again picked up. Biggles felt the blood drain from his face as he recognized the signal.
Dear goodness, it's Algy.
The nearest searchlight flashed on the machine, and the FE-2D stood out in lines of white fire in the center of the beam. The other light swung across and intensified the picture. Instantly, the air was alive with darting flecks of flame and hurtling metal. The British pilot twisted and turned like a snipe to get out of the silent white arms that clung to him like the tentacles of an octopus. A shell burst almost under the nose of the FE to the delight of the Germans. Then, with no warning, the earth rocked under their feet. It was as if the hill had turned into a raging volcano. A sheet of blinding flame leapt upwards. A deep-throated roar like a thunderclap almost shattered their eardrums. Simultaneously, both searchlights went out, and a ghastly silence fell, a stillness that was only broken by another noise. It was the sound of rushing waters. Some of the officers darted off to see what was happening. One wall of the reservoir had been blown clean out, and the vast weight of the pent-up water, suddenly released, had swept down the hillside, carrying all before it. It had descended on the Archie battery, and the earth had been torn from under the guns, which had rolled down the hill and were now buried under tons of rock, sand and debris. The Count was on the spot, with every man he could muster, trying to sort things out. Of von Stahlheim there was no sign, and Biggles was wondering what had happened to him when the officers who had gone to the hill began to trickle back in ones or twos with a vivid story to tell. Biggles heard the story unmoved, thinking of Alger's signal and what it portended. But to look for the message in the darkness was obviously out of the question. He stayed in the mess until the noise of engines being warmed up told him that the night bombers were getting ready to start. And feeling very sick of it all, he made his way into his room, and without switching on the light, threw himself upon the bed. He suspected that he had dozed when, sometime later, he heard the whistling hum of an aeroplane gliding in. He crossed to the window with a puzzled frown. As near as he could judge, the machine must have landed somewhere over the other side of the aerodrome from which the mysterious machine had taken off earlier in the evening. He realized that it had now come home, and with increasing curiosity stared out across the silent, moonlit wilderness. But he could see nothing, and was about to turn away when a figure came into view, walking rapidly. At first it was little more than a dim shadow, but as it drew nearer, he saw that it was an Arab in burnous and turban. Was it the same man? Breathlessly, he watched him approach, and it soon became clear that he was making for the fort. Biggles watched him disappear through the entrance, and a few seconds later a light appeared in one of the end windows. Biggles stole out of his room and crept along the back of the hangars until the black bulk of the old building loomed up in front of him. The window, some 6 feet above ground level, was too high for him to see into without something to stand on. He hunted round with desperate speed, and in his anxiety almost fell upon an old oil drum that lay half buried in the sand. He silently dragged it to the wall below the window from which streamed the shaft of yellow light. His heart was beating violently. He began to raise himself, inch by inch. Slowly, and with infinite care, he drew his eyes level and peeped over the ledge of the window. At a large desk in the center of the room, von Stahlheim was sitting writing. The inevitable cigarette smoldered between his lips, and his monocle was in place. His sticks rested against the side of the desk. Biggles dropped down, bitterly disappointed. It seemed that he had merely discovered von Stahlheim's private office. He smoothed out the mark of the drum in the sand, replaced it where he had found it, and hurried back to his room. Slowly, and lost in a whirl of conflicting thoughts, he took off his uniform and prepared for bed.
I wonder if a slim, arrogant dandy with a game leg could change his identity to that of the athletic, hard-riding Arab known as El Sharif. the cleverest spy in the German Secret Service.
Tired out, he sank into sleep, and was still in bed the following morning when he was startled by a peremptory knock on the door, which without invitation was pushed open, and the Count, closely followed by von Stahlheim, strode into the room. If any further indication were needed that something serious was afoot, a file of soldiers with fixed bayonets who halted in the corridor supplied the deficiency. Biggles sprang out of bed with more haste than dignity and regarded the intruders with astonishment.
All right, remain standing where you are. Bruno, explain how that found its way to the hillside by the reservoir.
The Count tossed a small golden object on the table. Biggles recognized it at once. It was his signet ring. It must have fallen from his finger while he was by the reservoir. The most amazing thing was that he hadn't missed it. To say that he was shaken as he stared at it would be an understatement. In the deathly hush that had fallen on the room, the match that von Stahlheim struck to light his cigarette sounded like a thunderclap. Biggles looked at the Count, aware that von Stahlheim's eyes were boring into him, watching his every move.
Leffens must have dropped it there.
Leffens?
Yes, sir. He had my ring.
Had your ring?
Yes, sir. I lent it to him yesterday morning. I met him on the tarmac just as he was getting into his machine. He told me he'd forgotten his ring, so as he was in a hurry, I lent him mine.
But I saw you wearing yours, only yesterday evening.
Not mine, Leffens. He suggested I had better borrow his during his absence, and told me that it was lying on his dressing table. I fetched it and have worn it ever since.
Then why aren't you wearing it now?
I always take it off when I wash, prior to going to bed.
Biggles took Leffens's ring from the drawer of his dressing table, where he had placed it when he returned from the flight in which he had shot down the rightful owner of the ring. He tossed the tiny circle of gold onto the table with the other. In spite of the tension, his brain was running easily and smoothly, and he looked at his interrogators with an expression of injured dignity on his face. It was the Count who recovered himself first.
But your ring was found on the hillside. Surely you're not suggesting that Leffens had any hand in the blowing up of the reservoir?
Biggles shrugged his shoulders. He saw von Stahlheim feeling in his pocket and knew he was searching for the incriminating bullet.
I'm not suggesting anything, sir, nor can I imagine how it got there. I only know that for some reason, Leffens disliked me. In fact, he tried to kill me.
Tried to kill you?
Yes, sir. He dived down at me out of the sun and tried to shoot me down. It was a clever attack and unexpected. Some of his bullets actually hit the machine. He zoomed back up into the sun and disappeared, but not before I had seen who it was. There is just a chance, of course, that he mistook my machine for an authentic enemy aircraft.
But why in the name of heaven didn't you report it?
I should have done so, sir, had Leffens returned. I wanted to hear his explanation first. But he did not come, and assuming that he had been shot down, I decided to let the matter drop rather than make such an unpleasant charge in his absence. I would respectfully remind you, sir, that I came here under open colours by orders of the German government. It seems that for some reason or other, I have been regarded with suspicion from the moment I arrived by certain members of your staff. I therefore humbly beg your indulgence and ask you to post me to another station as from today.
It was a bold bluff, but the Count reacted just as he hoped he would.
Nothing of the sort, Bruno. I'm sorry if there's been a misunderstanding, but I think we all understand each other now. I shan't be needing you this morning, but don't go far away in case I do. Come on, Erich.
Gosh, that was too close for my liking. One more boob like that, and it'll be the last.
After taking morning coffee in the mess, he made his way to the olive grove, where he began a systematic search for the message Algy must have dropped. He found it at last, caught up in the branches of one of the grey, gnarled trees. It was a small piece of khaki cloth, weighted with 2 cartridges, to which was attached a strip of white rag about a yard long. 1,000 people might have seen it and taken it for a piece of wind-blown litter without suspecting what it contained. After a cautious glance around, he opened the khaki rag and removed a slip of paper. The rag streamer and cartridges he dropped into a convenient hole in the tree. There was a brief printed message. Important. Rendezvous as soon as possible. That was all. He rolled the paper into a ball, chewed it to pulp, then threw it away, and made his way back to the tarmac, trying to think of a reasonable excuse to go for a flight. He went to the fort and asked the Count if he could do a reconnaissance. To his relief, the Count made no objection, and he hurried back to the hangars in high spirits. With the idea of making himself acquainted with its controls, he ordered out a Halberstadt in preference to a Pfalz, and was soon in the air on a direct course for the lines. But as soon as he was out of sight of the aerodrome, he swung away to the east in the direction of the oasis. He'd been flying on his new course about 10 minutes when his roving eye picked out a tiny moving speck far to the southeast, a good 2 miles away. He saw that it was a Halberstadt like his own, heading out over the open desert. There was nothing in that direction but wilderness for 100 miles, and certainly no troops or military targets there.
I'll keep an eye on you, my chicken. It'll be interesting to see what your game is.
He suddenly felt very hot, and with a glance at the sun, noticed it had assumed an unusual reddish hue. But he dismissed the phenomenon from his mind as the other machine started losing height. And then a remarkable thing occurred. The machine in front disappeared. In all his flying experience, he had never seen anything like it. Then, suddenly, his Halberstadt reared up on its tail and seemed to drop right out of his hands. He clenched his teeth as his stomach turned over in the most terrific bump he'd ever struck. The machine hit solid air again with a crash that he knew must have strained every wire and strut. It was almost like hitting water. His machine had fallen like a stone for nearly 2,000 feet. But as the first spatter of grit struck his face and the horizon was blotted out, he knew that he had run into a sandstorm. A gale of wind that was tearing the surface from the desert and hurling it high into the air. With the choking dust filling his nostrils and stinging his cheeks, he forgot all about the machine he'd been following, shoved the throttle wide open, turned at right angles, and raced across the path of the storm. The Halberstadt was tossed about like a dead leaf in an autumn gale. But presently the bumps grew less severe, and the ground again came into view. On the windswept desert, the sand dunes were rolling like a sea swell. But in one place, a long, narrow belt of palms rose up like an island in a stormy ocean, and towards it he steered his course. Knowing that the dust would soon work its way into the engine and cut it to pieces, his only course was to get down as quickly as possible, whatever risks it involved. So he pushed his nose down at a steep angle towards some wind-lashed trees, aiming to touch the ground on the leeward side of them. He felt his wheels touch, bump, bump again. But the landing was well judged, for his run had carried him amongst the outlying palms of the oasis. He was out in a flash, carrying 4 of the sandbags with which all desert-flying machines are equipped. Dropping to his knees, he dragged the sand into the bags with both arms and then tied them, by the cords provided for the purpose, to the wing and tail skids. Then, half blinded by the stinging sand, he ran into the oasis and flung himself down in the first dip he reached, to wait for the storm to blow itself out. It was with heartfelt thankfulness that he eventually heard the wind abating and knew that the worst of the storm was over. At the end, it died away quite suddenly. His first thought was for the machine, and he was relieved to find that it had suffered no damage, so he turned his attention to the immediate surroundings. Nearer to the heart of the oasis, tussocks of coarse grass sprouted through the sand and gave promise of more verdure within, possibly water. He hurried forward in the hope of being able to quench his thirst. He topped a rise, saw another one beyond, strode across the intervening dell, and ran up the far side. As his eyes grew level with the top, He stopped, then sank down silently and wormed his way into a growth of leathery bushes that clustered around the palm boles at that spot. For several seconds he lay quite still, shocked. Then he crawled to where he could see the scene beyond. In front of him, the ground fell away for a distance of perhaps 50 yards into a saucer-like depression, in the bottom of which was obviously a well. A score of Arabs stood listening to a man who was standing by the far side of the well, talking to them earnestly. It was Hauptmann Erich von Stahlhain. To Biggles, the whole thing was so incomprehensible that he could only lie and watch in fascinated wonder. How on earth had von Stahlhain got there, when only 2 hours before he had interrogated him in his room at Zabala, 60 miles away? What was he doing there with the Arabs? Why was he addressing them so fervently? It seemed that von Stahlhain was exhorting the Arabs to do something, and that his powerful personality was making itself felt, for in the end there was a general murmur of assent, and the party began to break up. Some of the Arabs went towards a line of wiry-looking ponies, mounted and rode away, while others, with von Stahlhain, entered a small, square, primitive hut that stood a short distance behind the well. After a short while, these reappeared, mounted their horses, and also rode away. Biggles lay quite still, never taking his eyes off the hut for an instant, waiting for von Stahlhain to reappear. But the hours passed by, and he didn't come out. The sun began to fall towards the west, and still he didn't come. Biggles' thirst became unbearable, and knowing he must drink or die, he rose to his feet and walked towards the well. Once there, he dragged up a bucket of the life-saving liquid, drank deeply, and splashed some over his smarting face and hands. Now refreshed, he walked boldly up to the door of the hut, which stood ajar, pushed it open, and entered. The entire building comprised a single room, and that room was empty. Beyond doubt or question, von Stahlhain had gone into the hut, and only Arabs had come out. So, where was von Stahlhain? Then the only possible solution flashed into Biggles' mind. He smiled grimly.
I fancy I'm beginning to rumble your little game, Mr. von Stahlhain. Or should I say, El Sharif?
As he left the hut, a wave of admiration for the German surged through him.
He's a clever devil and no mistake. But how the dickens did he get here? He must have flown. There was no other way he could have done it in the time. He was in the machine I saw. Someone flew him over, dropped him at the oasis, and then went back. They didn't hear me arrive because of the noise of the wind, and I was on the lee side of them. The Arabs were waiting here for him, and now he's gone off on some job. I wonder if this place is a regular rendezvous.
The word rendezvous reminded him of Algy and his belated appointment. He broke into a run that carried him over the brow of the hill behind which he had left the Halberstadt. As it came into view, a sea of Arabs surged round him, and he was flung heavily to the ground, where, half choked with sand, he was held down until his hands were tied behind his back. The Arabs all mounted quickly and set off at a gallop across the desert in a straggling bunch, with Biggles in the centre. That ride would live in Biggles' memory for many a day. The heat, the dust, and the thirst made life almost unbearable. As the sun began to fall towards the western horizon, low rocky hills began to appear. They were approaching the first of these when, without warning, a line of mounted horsemen, riding at full gallop and shouting as they came, tore round the base of the hill and swept down towards them. Their sudden appearance gave Biggles' captors no choice. They could only stop and fight stubbornly. Biggles was left sitting alone on his horse until, stung by a ricocheting bullet, it reared up and threw him. So he lay where he had fallen, wondering how long it would be before one of the flying bullets found him. Presently, the firing died away, and he sat up. Of his original captors, none remained. The newcomers, nearly 50 of them, were obviously in high spirits at their success. To his astonishment, they lifted him to his feet, cut his bonds, and made signals that he had nothing more to fear. He was invited to mount a horse, and the whole party set off at a brisk pace towards the hills. By dusk, Biggles was sagging in the saddle, conscious only of a deadly tiredness, when he was startled by the ringing challenge of a British sentry. He was made to dismount and walk towards a barbed wire fence, which he could see dimly in the fast-failing light. Behind its protective screen were a number of camouflaged canvas bell tents. Nearer at hand was a larger tent, and a number of British Tommies in khaki drill jackets, shorts, and pith helmets. A young officer, tanned by the sun, stepped forward towards the Arabs, and after a short conversation, handed something to the leader, who, without another word, turned his horse and rode away into the night, followed by the others. Biggles was left with a soldier on each side of him, and they moved forward to a gate in the wire, where they halted a few yards from the large tent in which a light was now burning. Then Biggles saw a curious thing. A distorted shadow of a man, who was evidently standing inside the tent between the canvas and the light, leaned forward. A hand lifted and tapped the ash off the cigarette it held between its fingers. Of all the men Biggles knew, only one had that peculiar trick of tapping his cigarette with his forefinger, and that was von Stahlheim. As he watched the shadow dumbfounded, wondering if his tired eyes were deceiving him, it disappeared, and the officer addressed him.
Do you speak English?
A little, yes.
Biggles mustered the best German accent he could.
Don't give me more trouble than you can help. I may as well tell you. Those Arabs demanded a lot of money for you, or threatened to slit your throat there and then. I couldn't watch them do that, even though you are a German, so I gave it to them. I mention it in the hope that you'll be grateful and not give me more trouble than you can help before I can get rid of you. What's your name?
Leopold Brunau.
I see you're a flying officer.
Yes.
Where's your machine?
It is somewhere in the desert.
What is the number of your squadron?
I regret I cannot answer that question.
Perhaps you're right. No matter. They'll ask you plenty of questions at headquarters. I'll make you as comfortable as I can for the night. Can you ride?
Ride? Oh, yeah.
Then get mounted. These men are taking you down the lines, and the sooner you get there, the better, because you'll find it thundering hot presently. And I must warn you again that the men have orders to shoot if you try to get away.
Biggles was in no position to argue, and was soon trotting over the twilit wilderness in the centre of his escort. For a few miles they held on a straight, westerly course. But as the sun rose in a blaze of scarlet, they began to veer towards the east. Biggles experienced a pang of alarm. They were certainly not going towards British lines. The sun was well up when at last they reached a wadi that cut down into a flat plain, where the guards dismounted and signalled to him to do the same. Then the one in charge of the party handed him a small package, and, indicating that he was to remain where he was, took Biggles' horse and led the other Arabs round the nearby bend in the rock wall. Biggles sat back in the shade of the rock and awaited their return. Some time later, moved by sheer curiosity, he walked down to the place where they'd disappeared. To his infinite amazement, they were nowhere in sight. The only sign of life he could see was a jackal slinking among the rocks. He returned to the wadi, when it occurred to him the package that had been given to him might supply a clue, and tore it open eagerly. He was right. It did. The package contained biscuits and a slab of chocolate and a flask of water. Attached to the flask by a rubber band was a sheet of notepaper on which had been written 3 words. Wait. A friend. He held up the paper to the light, and a low whistle escaped his lips, and his eyes fell on the familiar crown watermark.
So I, a German officer, have a friend in a British post, eh? How very interesting.
He was in the act of munching the chocolate when he was surprised to hear an aeroplane approaching. His surprise became wonderment when he saw it was a Halberstadt gliding towards the wadi with the obvious intention of landing. With growing curiosity, he watched it approach. Its wheels touched down on the unsympathetic surface, and it taxied tail up towards the place where Biggles was standing. It came to a standstill, and the pilot raised his arm in a beckoning gesture. It was Mayor. Biggles walked across.
Hello, Mayor. Where the dickens have you come from?
Hello, Brunau. Get in the rear cockpit.
Where are we going?
Home! Where the devil do you think?
Biggles climbed into the seat, and Mayor pulled the throttle open and sped across the desolate waste. Biggles watched the waddy fall away behind as Mayor lifted the machine from the ground and began climbing for height. He surveyed the landscape in the hope of picking out a landmark that he knew, and at the same time turning over in his mind the strange manner of his rescue. Who was the friend in the British post? He could think of no one but von Stahlheim, although he would never have guessed, but for the shadow on the tent. Then, dimly, the situation began to take form. Von Stahlheim, disguised as an Arab, was operating behind the British lines. He may have been responsible for the Sheiks turning against the British, in spite of the brilliant and fearless efforts of Major Stern to prevent it. The Halberstadt squadron at Zabala, while carrying out regular routine duties, was also working with von Stahlheim, flying him over the lines and picking him up at prearranged meeting places. The previous day provided a good example when von Stahlheim had flown over to try to influence the Arabs at the oasis. Later, he must have learned that Brunau was a prisoner in British hands, and in some way been able to arrange for him to be sent down the lines in charge of the Arabs who were in his pay, in order to effect his rescue. Biggles was convinced that at last he was on the track of the inside causes of the British failures in the Middle East. Far away on the horizon, he could just make out a dull shadow that might have been an oasis, but he was uncertain whether it was Abbasud or the oasis where he had seen von Stahlheim, or indeed if it was either of them. He was about to ask Mayer if he had a map when the shrill chatter of a machine gun split the air, and a shower of lead struck the Halberstadt like a flail. There was a shrill whang of metal striking metal, and a ghastly tearing sound of splintering woodwork. The stricken machine lurched drunkenly as the engine cut dead, and a long feather of oily black smoke swirled away aft. From the direction of the sun whence the attack had come, Biggles caught a fleeting glimpse of grey shadow that banked round in a steep stalling turn to renew the attack. He turned to warn Mayer, and a cry of horror broke from his lips as he saw him sagging insensibly in his safety belt, a trickle of blood oozing from under the ear flaps of his leather helmet. As in a ghastly nightmare, Biggles heard the staccato clatter of the guns again and felt the machine shudder as the controls flapped uselessly. Its nose lurched downwards, and the next instant the machine was spinning wildly earthward. Biggles, cold with fear, acted with the deliberation of long experience. The machine was fitted with dual controls, and he pushed the rear stick forward and kicked on full top rudder. The machine began to respond. Would it come out of the spin in time? It was going to be touch and go. Slowly, the nose of the machine came up as it came out of the spin. Biggles pulled the stick back and held his breath. The best he could hope for was some sort of pancake landing. But luck was against him. A large boulder caught the axle of his undercarriage. Biggles was flung violently against the instrument board. The propeller boss bored into the ground. The tail swung up and over in a complete semicircle as the machine somersaulted in a final tearing, rending, splintering crash. Then, silence.
Mayor! Mayor! Where are you?
There was no answer, so he tore the debris aside until he found the German, buried under the tangled remains of the plane. Somehow he got him clear of the cockpit and dragged him to a spot some distance away, and took off his helmet. A long red wheal across the side of his head told its own story. The bullet had struck him a glancing blow that had knocked him unconscious and might, or might not, prove fatal. He could find no other bullet wounds, although his clothes were badly torn about and his face bruised, so he made him as comfortable as possible in the shade of the rock. After a few minutes, Mayer opened his eyes and stared about him wonderingly. Wonderment gave way to understanding as complete consciousness returned, and he smiled weakly.
What happened?
An Englander dropped on us out of the sun and hit us with his first burst.
No.
I should lie still for a bit if I were you. You'll be better presently.
You'd better go on.
Go on? And leave you here? No. I'll wait for you.
Do you know where we are?
No, not exactly.
We're 50 miles from our lines, and it's 50 miles of waterless desert. So you'd better be starting.
No hurry. I'll wait for you.
It'll be no use waiting for me,
Why not?
because I shan't be coming.
Who says so?
I do. My leg is broken. Don't look so shocked. It's the fortune of war. Before you go, do something for me.
What is it?
Look in my cockpit and see if you can find my pistol. I shall need it.
No, you won't.
You wouldn't leave me here to die of thirst and the hyenas.
Who's talking about leaving you? Just you lie still, while I think it over.
If you've any sense, you'll go on. There's no need for us both to die.
Biggles couldn't help but admire Mayer's courage as he walked across and examined the machine. There were a few drops of water in the radiator, but it was poisonous-looking fluid. He dug about in the wreckage till he found Mayer's map and plotted their position. They were far from the German and British lines. But to the south and east there were 2 or 3 very small oases, between 15 and 20 miles away. Could he do it in the heat of the day? Alone, perhaps, but with a wounded companion? Definitely no. The idea of leaving Mayer to perish never crossed his mind. He regarded the crashed machine with a speculative eye, and a possibility occurred to him. While Mayer watched him dispassionately, he constructed a fairly serviceable 2-wheeled trailer from the undercarriage and remains of the wing spars. Finally, he hunted about in the wreckage for the seat cushions. He found them, threw them on the crazy vehicle, and picking up some pieces of interplane struts and canvas, approached the German.
Help me as much as you can while I get this leg of yours fixed up.
What are you going to do?
Tie your leg up in these splints so that it won't hurt more than can be helped while I get you on the perambulator.
Don't be a fool!
If you don't lie still, I'll fetch you a crack on the other side of your skull. Do you think I want to hang about here all day? Come on.
Not without difficulty, he bound up Mayer's leg in the improvised splints and then lifted him bodily onto the trailer. He handed him a piece of fabric to use as a sunshade, and without another word set off in the direction in which he judged the oasis to be. Fortunately, the ground was flat and fairly open, but the wheels dragged heavily through the loose sand that became more frequent as he went on. The sun climbed to its zenith, and its white bars of heat struck down with relentless force. In all directions stretched the wilderness, an eternal monotony of sand and rock. Once he straightened his back and looked around the scene, but its overwhelming solitude made him shudder, and he went on with his task. The hours passed, and still he struggled on. His lips were black and dry. He no longer perspired, for the sun drank up every drop of moisture as soon as it appeared. Mayer was more fortunate, but he lapsed into unconsciousness. He began to mutter in German, "Ich bin krank. Ich bin krank." Biggles began to sway as he walked. Once he fell and lay where he had fallen for a full minute before he scrambled to his feet and set off with a fresh burst of energy. He topped another rise and saw a long group of green palm fronds against the blue sky above the next dip. And slowly, it penetrated his bemused mind that they were very real, very close, and very, very desirable. He broke into a drunken run, still dragging the trailer, and breathing in deep, wheezing gasps. The palm trees seemed to float towards him, and presently he was amongst them, patting the rough boles with his hands. In front of him was the well and the hut where, in the afternoon before, he had seen von Stahlheim. He'd returned to his starting point. He staggered to the well, dragged up the receptacle, and drank as he had never drunk before. Then he refilled the makeshift bucket and ran back to Mayer, and with difficulty got some of the water between his parched lips, at the same time dabbing his face and neck with it. When he felt that he could do no more for the sick man, he returned to the well and buried his face and arms in the cool liquid. He walked up to the hut, but it was empty, so he returned to Mayer with the idea of making him as comfortable as possible before going to the spot where he had left the Halberstadt, to make sure it was still there and undamaged. But suddenly he felt dreadfully tired and sat down near the trailer. The sun was now sinking fast, and his head nodded once or twice, and he slipped slowly sideways onto the sand, sound asleep. A strange sound awakened him. It seemed to come from the other side of the oasis, so he made his way cautiously through the palms to a slight rise from which he could see the desert beyond. Mustering in serried ranks was an army of Arabs, gathering together for what could only be one of the biggest Arab raids ever organized, for he had no delusions as to their purpose. For half an hour he lay and watched them, and at the end of that time they began to move off out into the desert. And he had no need to watch them for very long to guess their objective, for the direction they took would bring them within a few hours to the eastern outposts of the British Army.
If that bunch hits our lines of communication without warning, our frontline trenches will be cut off from supplies and everything else. I shall have to let our people know somehow.
He hurried round the edge of the oasis to where he had left the Halberstadt the previous day. After removing the sandbag anchors, he dragged the Halberstadt into the open, turned on the petrol tap, switched on the ignition, and went to the propeller in order to swing it. Before he did so, he took a leaf from his notebook, wrote a message on it, and addressed it to Algy. This done, he ripped a length of material from his shirt to form a streamer, and tying the message in it with a pebble to give it weight, put it in his pocket and returned to the engine. In the warm air, it started at once, and he climbed quickly into his seat and began to taxi carefully to where he had left Mayer still unconscious. Then he set to work on the formidable task of getting him into the rear cockpit. Soon they were flying over the moonlit desert. Presently, a white wavering finger probed the sky some distance ahead, and he knew he was approaching the British lines. He throttled back and began a long glide towards the aerodrome at Kantara. Searchlight beams were combing the sky for him, but he smiled grimly as the lights of the aerodrome came into view. White lines of tracer bullets were streaking upwards, but in the darkness the shooting was chiefly guesswork, and none of them came near him. He raced low over the aerodrome, and when he reached the middle, he tossed the message overboard and opened and closed the throttle twice in quick succession. Then he pulled it wide open and zigzagged out of the vicinity, racing towards the German lines. The scattered lights of Zabala came into sight at last, and he glided down towards the sheds and finished his run within a few yards of them. He switched off the engine and sat quite still, and his aching nerves collapsed like a piece of taut elastic when it's cut in the middle. He blinked owlishly as a flashlight was turned on his face.
Mayer. Get Mayer. Mind his leg.
Then darkness surged up and around him, as he fell into a sleep of utter exhaustion. When he awoke, the sun was throwing oblique shafts of yellow light through the gaps in the half-drawn curtains of his room. And as wakefulness cast out the last vestiges of sleep, he sat up with a yawn and stretched. He got out of bed, threw back the blinds, surveyed himself in the mirror, shuddered, and decided to take a bath immediately. An orderly appeared while he was there, and finding he was up, returned with breakfast on a tray, and a smile which suggested to Biggles that he was in the squadron's good books. The Count arrived, beaming.
Congratulations, Bruno. Most courageous. I am recommending you for the Iron Cross.
It was not worth such an honor. How is Mayor, by the way?
As well as one might expect, considering everything. He told me the story of what happened, or as much as he knows of it. How did you come to be taken prisoner in the first place?
A sandstorm forced me down. I waited for it to pass when a party of Arabs turned up and carted me off to the nearest British post, where they held me to ransom, or something of the sort.
Unpredictable, these Arabs. Von Stahlheim thinks a lot of them, though. Perhaps because he was out here before the war and knows their habits and language. That's why he's here now. Between ourselves, he's got a big show on at this very moment, which... but perhaps I'd better not say more. Come along down to the mess as soon as you're ready. Well, see you presently, then.
So von Stahlheim is leading the Arabs, and he isn't back yet.
But even as the thought crossed his mind, there was a roar overhead, and a Halberstadt side-slipped steeply to a clever landing. It swung round and taxied to the sheds. Von Stahlheim, in German uniform, climbed out of the back seat and limped quickly towards headquarters. With a thrill of anticipation, Biggles went out and strolled towards the mess. He'd only been there a few minutes when the Count, accompanied by von Stahlheim, came into the room. One glance at their faces told Biggles all that he wanted to know about the Arab attack. The Count looked worried, while von Stahlheim was pale under his tan and wore a bandage on his left hand. Von Stahlheim beckoned to Biggles, who walked over quickly to where the German was waiting for him.
Count von Fauburg has just told me about the business of Mayer. I gather you put up a remarkably fine performance. Can you remember exactly where Mayer's machine crashed?
I think I can mark the position to within a mile or two.
Do you think you could find the crash?
Oh, yes, no difficulty.
Good. Then I want you to fly over and drop an incendiary bomb on the wreck. The machine must be utterly destroyed. Do you think you could manage it?
I'm quite sure of it.
Very well. Then get off at once, and take a camera with you. To satisfy myself, I should like to see a photograph.
Yes, sir. I'll take a Pfalz and go over immediately.
He bowed and left the room, and collecting his overalls and flying kit, made his way to the tarmac. He asked the Pfalz squadron for a machine for a special mission, and requested that 4 20-pound incendiary bombs be fitted to the bomb racks. In a few minutes, with these in place, he taxied out and took off towards the place where the remains of the Halberstadt were piled up. Two matters exercised his thoughts: von Stahlheim's anxiety to secure the destruction of the machine, and the possibility of having a word with Algy. He found the crash without difficulty, and after circling round looking for the best landing place, selected a patch free from rocks. Leaving the propeller ticking over, he hastened to the well-remembered scene, and began a systematic search of the wreckage. For half an hour he hunted, and then he came upon an article so incongruous that he regarded it in stupefied amazement. In a secret stowage place between the two cockpits was a British officer's field service cap. There was nothing to show to whom it belonged, but the maker's name was that of a well-known London outfitter.
I should never have guessed that was the thing that friend Erich was scared about. Or is it simply a souvenir? It's no use burning a good hat, so I'll take it with me.
Then he took out a box of matches, struck one, and held it to the sun-dried fabric of the machine. When it was well alight, he ran back to his plane, took off, and dropped his bombs on the conflagration. Then he took 2 or 3 photographs of the fire, waiting for a few minutes until the destruction of the machine was clearly revealed, then took another photograph and raced off in the direction of the oasis of Abu Sud. At the oasis, Algy was waiting for him, a Sopwith parked nearby.
Where the dickens have you been all this time? I've been frizzling here like a herring in a pan for 2 blinking days. I was beginning to think they must have shot you.
I've been busy. Do you think I've got nothing better to do than chase to and fro between Zambala and here? Where did you get that camel?
They sent it up from Heliopolis. They gave it to me, pro tem. I shot a halbertstadt down in it yesterday.
Where?
About 20 miles northeast of here. It hit the floor with a dickens of a crack. You should have heard it.
I did. I was in it.
You were... Great Scott. Well, I wasn't to know, was I?
A fat lot of chance you gave me. I didn't even see you till you started pumping out the lead.
My word. I might have killed you.
Might? You thundering nearly did.
Well, I wasn't to know you might be in it. I thought you were wandering about behind the British lines.
How the deuce did you know that?
Because about midnight, number 5 post rang up headquarters to say that he'd collected a prisoner named Brunau from a bunch of Arabs and wanted to know what he was to do with him. Well, poor old Raymond nearly threw a fit when he heard it and sent me up with special instructions to fly you down to Kantara. But when I got there, you'd already left in charge of a party of Major Stern's Arabs,
Whose Arabs?
Stern's. Why, what's wrong?
Was Stern up there when you got there?
No, he'd just gone. Pushed off out into the desert on one of his trips.
Go on.
Well, I went back to report what had happened, and in the afternoon, the Arabs rolled up with a tale of how you'd escaped, by jumping on their best horse while they rested and leaping a terrific chasm over which it was impossible to follow you. They fired at you but missed, and then you disappeared behind some rocks and were never found again.
So that's what they told you, is it? Makes those yarns about the Arabian Nights sound tame.
Why? Didn't you bolt?
Bolt my foot. But I haven't time to tell you the whole story now. Did you get my message about the Arabs advancing on you?
We certainly did. The Australian cavalry were waiting for them and they gave them a plastering. A lot were taken prisoner, and they're calling for the blood of the European who led them into the trap. For that's what they swear happened.
Well, that clears things up a bit. I begin to see daylight. Now, what about that news you had for me? The news you mentioned in the message you dropped?
Oh, yes. I've been waiting to tell you about that. Raymond got a dispatch in code from the airboard that he was to warn you to beware of Brunau.
Brunau? But he's in London.
No, he isn't. Although our people were watching the real Brunau, he disappeared suddenly, and they fancy it was something to do with you. They think he departed for Germany via Holland, and you ought to be warned in case he turned up here.
Why should he?
Don't ask me. Oh, look, there's one last thing. We've laid out a dummy aerodrome, 12 miles southeast of Kantara. It looks fine from the air. If you want to please the Germans, you can tell them where it is. It's already fairly aching to be bombed.
That's fine.
Biggles then gave Algy the officer's cap that he'd found in Mayer's cockpit.
Hang on to that. Take it back to Raymond. Tell him to hide it. On no account must anyone see it. Got that?
Yes, that's quite clear.
Biggles arrived in Zamala and went to the headquarters offices where von Stahlheim and the Count were waiting for him.
Ah, Brunau. Did you manage it all right?
I burnt the machine and took the photographs, yes.
Did you land?
Land? Why should I risk a landing when I had incendiary bombs with me?
Just as a matter of interest, that's all. You've been a long time, haven't you?
As a matter of fact, I have. But I saw something that intrigued me, and I thought it was worthwhile following it up.
Indeed? And what was it?
A new type of British machine, sir. I didn't think they had any of them on this front. A very fast machine called the Camel, I think. I took up a position in the sun and watched it, thinking it might possibly lead to the aerodrome of a new squadron.
Splendid! What then?
I saw it land at what looks like a new aerodrome about 12 miles southeast of Kantara. I'm not sure about it being a new aerodrome, but I've never noticed it before.
I've never heard of an aerodrome there.
It wasn't there a few days ago.
Biggles wondered how he knew that, but said nothing.
Very well. Go in and get some lunch.
So Biggles saluted and departed in the direction of the mess. He'd just finished lunch when a message came that he was wanted in the headquarters again. He found Count von Faubourg sitting at his desk, while von Stahlheim leaned in his usual position against the side, blowing clouds of cigarette smoke into the air.
Ah, Bruno, there you are. We have been talking about this report of yours concerning the new aerodrome, and have decided that there is a strong probability that the British have brought out a new squadron. So, if we can put some of the machines out of action, so much the better. Otherwise, we are likely to have some casualties. You marked down the exact position of the aerodrome, did you not?
I did, sir.
Good. I've detailed 6 machines to go over this afternoon and strike while the iron is hot, so to speak. And, in order that there should be no mistake, I want you to fly the leading one.
Sir?
It's a trifle irregular, I know. And Oberleutnant Kranz, who is commanding the Staffel, can still be in command. But you could show the way and take charge of the operation just while you were over the British lines. Is that quite clear?
Quite, sir.
Each machine will carry 2 heavy bombs. And one machine will, of course, take a camera so that we can study the layout of the aerodrome at our leisure, as well as see if the bombs do any damage.
I'll take the camera, if you like, sir.
That would be excellent. Then I'll leave it to you to fix up the details with Kranz. Good luck.
Biggles saluted and withdrew with mixed feelings, then walked to the hangars where preparations for the raid were going forward. Half an hour later, 6 machines in V formation, with Biggles at the spearhead, were in the air. After an hour, they crossed the British lines and then raced on full throttle towards the now visible aerodrome. There was no wind, so it was unnecessary to turn in order to deliver the attack, and the first 6 bombs sailed down. But to Biggles' disgust, they nearly all went wide. He'd hoped to take a really thrilling photograph back to the Count, showing at least one hangar in flames. The 6 machines turned slowly in a wide circle, and then returning from the opposite direction, laid their remaining eggs. That is, all except Biggles. This time the aim was better. 2 bombs fell on the aerodrome and 1 on the end hangar. But still, Biggles was not satisfied, so he dived out of formation, losing height as quickly as possible, and turning again towards the aerodrome, took the center buildings in his bomb sight and pulled the toggle. The bomb plunged earthwards, and a pillar of smoke and flame leapt high into the air. It was a direct hit. He had his camera over the side in an instant, but he had only taken 2 photographs when such a tornado of shells burst around him that he dropped the instrument onto the floor of the cockpit and pulled up his nose to rejoin the formation. The other 5 machines were in no better case, and it seemed that every anti-aircraft gun on the British front had been concentrated on the spot.
What a fool I am. Raymond would know that once I'd given the Germans the position of the aerodrome, they'd send their bombers over. He could easily get the guns together without disclosing my part of the business. My gosh, I ought to have thought of that.
He flinched as a shell burst under his tail, and his observer, a youth called Bronvelt, made desperate signals to get out of the vicinity as soon as possible. He needed no urging. The formation, which had become badly scattered in the barrage, now began to reform, and he'd just taken his place in the lead when, glancing forward through the center section, he saw something that set his fingertips tingling. Cutting across their front, on a course that would effectually cut them off from the German lines, were 2 squadrons of aeroplanes. One approaching from the west was composed of 8 Sopwith pups with a solitary camel hanging on its flank. The other, coming up from the east, comprised 6 Bristol fighters. Biggles eyed the camel with a wry expression on his face.
I'd bet a month's pay to a piastre that Algy has a smack at me first. He always does like taking on the leader.
The camel pulled up in a steep zoom, half-rolled, and then whirled round for the attack, with its nose pointing down at Biggles' Halberstadt. For once, Biggles was nonplussed. He glanced over his shoulder and saw Bronvelt crouching over his gun, waiting for the camel to come within range. His face was grim and set, and his hands were steady, and ready to put up a good fight. Something like panic seized him as he visualized the unthinkable picture of his gunner killing Algy, or conversely, Algy's feelings when he found that he'd shot down his best friend.
At least I can let Algy know it's me.
White-faced, he reached for his signal pistol, slipped in a red cartridge, and sent a streak of scarlet fire blazing across the nose of the diving camel. But to his horror, the pilot paid no attention to it. More with the object of avoiding a collision, Biggles swung round in a steep bank, and the German machines fell in line behind him. The movement disconcerted the British pilots, and while they were still milling around in indecision, Biggles raced, nose down, for home. The danger averted. Biggles sighed with relief as he looked back over his shoulder, and then stiffened with horror at the sight that met his eyes. The British machines, with the exception of one, had turned back, but the camel, by reason of its superior speed, had continued the chase and had caught them. Its pilot was evidently still determined to strike at the leader of the Hun formation. As it came within range, jets of orange flame darted from the muzzles of the guns on its engine cowling. At the same moment, Bronvelt, crouching low behind his parabellum gun, pulled the trigger. Biggles saw the tracer leap in a straight line that ended at the whirring engine of the British machine. Something stung his shoulder, but he hardly felt it. His eyes fixed on the camel in a kind of fascinated horror. For a moment, it hung in space, then it turned slowly over on its back and plunged earthward. In a state of mental paralysis, Biggles saw a wing break off, and the fuselage with its human cargo dropped like a cannonball. Then he turned away. He shifted his gaze to Bronvelt, who gave a victorious smile and turned his thumbs upwards, a signal that means the same thing the world over. Biggles felt as if he'd been turned into a block of stone. Something seemed to have died inside him, leaving in its place only a bitter hatred of the war, and one single thought.
Algy has gone. Algy has gone.
At Zabala, the Count, von Stahlhain, and several other officers were standing on the tarmac waiting, but none of them meant anything to him now. He no longer cared a fig if he was suspected, arrested, or even shot. He walked slowly towards the spot upon which the others were converging. He could hear voices around him, German voices. What was happening? He hardly knew.
Splendid! Splendid! Kranz is full of praise for the way you handled a nasty situation. Your firing of the red signal to form circle, when you did, he says, saved the whole formation. And that last bomb of yours, and the way you left the formation to make sure of a hit, was brilliant. Your recommendation for the Iron Cross shall go off today. And Bronvelt has also shot down a camel. It fell in our lines, and the artillery rang up to say that they are sending the body here for burial. We will see that it is done properly, as we always do. And I'm looking forward to seeing the photographs now.
Biggles removed his flying cap and goggles and went to his room and threw himself on his bed. For a long time, he lay quite still, trying to adjust himself to the new state of things. His most poignant thought was that he had been responsible for Algy's death in the first place by causing him to be posted to Palestine. He rose wearily. He washed and was drying his face when an unusual sound took him to the window. A tender had stopped, and half a dozen grey-coated soldiers in the uniform of the German field artillery were unloading a long, slim object shrouded in a dark blanket. He watched the soldiers carry the body into the tent that had evidently been set aside as a temporary mortuary. He saw them come out, close the flap behind them, salute, and return to the tender, which with a grinding of gears disappeared from sight. Then, moved by some impulse, he left the room and strode firmly towards the tent. He entered and stood in misery at the end of the camp bed on which the pitiful object rested. Slowly, and with a hand that shook, he lifted the end of the blanket and looked. How long he stood there, he never knew. Just stared and stared. The face was not Algy's. It was that of a middle-aged man in uniform, with pilot's wings sewn on his tunic above the white and violet ribbon of the military cross. Biggles pulled himself together with a stupendous effort and walked away reverently. He hurried back to his room. Next morning, he got out of bed and sat by the open window while he considered how much he had learned about El Sharif, the German super spy. That von Stahlheim was El Sharif he no longer doubted, but it was hardly possible that there would be two German spies masquerading as Arabs behind the British lines. And that von Stahlheim did adopt Arab disguise was certain. The incident at the Oasis was sufficient proof of that. The feigned limp, he felt, was all part of a clever pose to throw possible investigators off the scent. No one could even think of von Stahlheim without the infirmity. As Erich von Stahlheim, he made his headquarters at Zabala. At night, he changed, and under the pseudonym of El Sharif, worked behind the British lines, coming and going by a special detailed aeroplane. Biggles was convinced that he was right.
The pilot flies him over, lands him well behind the lines, at the Oasis, for instance, and then comes home. Later, at a pre-arranged time and place, he goes over and picks him up. That's what Mayer was doing the day he picked me up. Mayer landed for von Stahlheim, but when he found me there instead, he knew he had to bring me back. If only I could catch von Stahlheim in the act of landing, there would be an end to it. The only other way to nab him would be to find out the Arab name he adopts when he's over there, hanging about our troops picking up information. The only thing I can't get over is that shadow on the tent, and, but for the fact that he must have been somewhere around in order to learn that I was a prisoner and then effect my rescue, I should feel inclined to think that I'd been mistaken. It's funny he's never taken credit for getting me out of the mess. No, perhaps it isn't funny. Oh, dash it, I don't know. Unless...
He stared thoughtfully at the desert for some time. After breakfast, he reported to headquarters and found von Stahlheim there alone.
Good morning, Brunau.
Good morning, von Stahlheim.
Quite a good photo. Look.
Von Stahlheim passed the last photograph Biggles had taken of Mayer's burning Halberstadt. The photograph showed not only the charred, smoking wreck, but the desert beyond. Across the soft sand where he had landed ran a line of wheel tracks. They began some distance from the crash and ran off the top right-hand corner of the photograph. He looked up to see von Stahlheim looking at him, mockingly.
I may be mistaken, but I understood you to say that you didn't land.
No, you were not mistaken. Why did you say that?
I was wondering how the wheel marks got there. That's all.
Oh, those. Those were the marks made by my homemade trailer.
Of course. Funny. I didn't think of that.
One cannot always expect to think of everything. Good morning, Count.
Good morning, Brunau. Morning, Erich. Going to be hot again. Has Hauptmann von Stahlheim told you what we were discussing last night?
No, sir.
I see. Well, the position is this. As you are no doubt aware, the chief reason why you were sent here was because of your knowledge of the English and their language. It was thought that you might be able to undertake duties that would be impossible for for one of our own people. You have a British RFC uniform, and we have British airplanes. Yet neither have been fully exploited.
He lit a long black cigar.
A blow has fallen, the importance of which cannot be exaggerated. It is, in fact, the most serious setback we've had for a long time. Tell me, Brunau, have you ever heard of one who is called El Sharif?
How Biggles kept his face immobile he never knew, for the word set every nerve of his body jangling. He pretended to think for a moment.
I seem to recall it, sir, but in what connection I cannot think. I didn't pay much attention to it.
Then I will tell you. El Sharif was a German agent. Not only was he the cleverest agent in Palestine, but in the world.
Was?
He has been caught, at last.
Biggles continued staring straight at the Count, struggling to prevent his face from betraying what he was thinking.
What a pity.
Pity? It's a tragedy, an overwhelming misfortune. He was taken yesterday in a cunningly set trap by Major Stern, who, as you may know, is one of the cleverest men on the British side.
By Major Stern?
The British have made no announcement about it, nor do we expect them to, yet. But General Headquarters, by means only known to themselves, got the news through late last night.
Biggles' mind seemed to have collapsed in complete chaos, as all his conjectures crashed to the ground. He could hardly follow what the Count was saying when he continued.
Well, there it is. I was hoping that you might try to effect a rescue.
Biggles felt he was going insane. Was the Count seriously asking him to rescue El Sharif when... He saw the Count was waiting for his answer.
I'll do anything I can, sir.
Good man. All I can tell you is that El Sharif will probably be sent under special escort to British General Headquarters for interrogation.
Then I'd better go over and do what I can. Can you give me any idea of what he looks like, so that I shall be able to recognize him if I see him?
Yes. He's a German, although he will of course be dressed as an Arab. He's lived with the Arabs for so long that he looks Arab, thinks Arab, speaks Arabic. Tall, brown, really brown, drooping black moustache, dark eyes, and rather a big nose, like the beak of a hawk. It's not much of a description, but it's the best I can give you. If you can get near him, show him your ring, and he'll understand. He will still have his hidden about him, if the British didn't take it away when they searched him.
Very good, sir. I'll get off right away.
Biggles saluted, turned on his heel, and departed to his room. He changed into his RFC uniform, pulled his overalls on over it, went down to the tarmac, ordered out the Bristol fighter, and landed at Kantara exactly 35 minutes later. He taxied up to the hangars, and telling the duty NCO to leave his machine where it was in case he needed it urgently, went straight to Major Raymond's tent. He found the Major working at his desk.
Is this tale true about your catching El Sharif, sir?
Quite true. But how'd you know about it?
Von Faubourg told me this morning.
He wasn't long getting the news then.
So it seems. How did you work it?
Stern did it. He managed to pick up a clue and laid a pretty trap. And El Sharif, cunning as he is, walked straight into it. We've got him here at Jebel Zalud, the village just behind. General Headquarters are there. They've been trying to get some information out of him, but it's no use. He won't speak. He won't do anything else if it comes to that. Won't eat or drink. He's an Arab, you know.
Arab? You mean he's disguised as an Arab?
No, he is, or rather was, one of our most trusted sheikhs. He's a fellow with a big following, too.
How do you know it's El Sharif?
Stern was sure of it before he collared him, and he was wearing one of those rings that you got, the German Secret Service ring. I got it here. Here it is. He'd also got some very interesting documents on him, plans of British positions and so on.
Biggles picked up the ring that the Major had tossed onto the table and looked at it with interest.
I should like to see this cove.
I think it could be arranged, though I can't see much point. You'll have to make haste, though.
Why?
He was tried by a specially convened field general court-martial this morning, sentenced to death.
Good God. When is sentence to be carried out?
Oh, today sometime. Certainly before sundown.
That's awkward.
Why?
Because I've been sent over here to rescue him.
Are you serious?
Too true I am.
What you going to do about it?
Nothing. If you've got the fellow, then that's the end of the story as far as I'm concerned.
That's what I thought. In fact, that's why I sent Lacey over to let you know.
You did what?
I sent Lacey over. I couldn't do less. There was no point in your going on risking your neck at Zabala.
Where's Algy now?
Oh, he's gone. He took off just before you landed. He's going to do the message-dropping stunt in the olive grove. It's a pity he went, but naturally I didn't expect the Huns to tell you about our catching El Sharif.
In my experience, it's the very last thing that you'd expect that always happens in this game. My word, dogfighting is child's play to it. Just as a matter of curiosity, though, I'd like to have a deco at this man who is called El Sharif.
Well, I'll see if it can be arranged.
2 hours later, Biggles again sat in Major Raymond's tent, where the Major was busy writing on a pad. Finally, he handed 2 sheets of paper to Biggles.
How's this? The first is an official notification that will appear in tonight's confidential orders, and the other is the notice that will be issued to the press.
They seem to be okay, sir. Good, then I'll be going now.
You still insist in going back to Zabala?
I don't want to, sir, but I think it's up to me to try to get the truth about von Stahlhein's game while I can come and go. If I find things are getting too hot, I'll pack up and report here.
As you wish.
Cheerio for the present, then, sir. Remember me to Algy when he comes back.
Lost in thought, he walked slowly back to where he had left the Bristol, climbed into the cockpit, and took off. He hardly bothered to watch the sky. Over the British side of the lines, he had nothing to fear, and over the German side, the white bar on his wings made him safe from attack from German aeroplanes. It was therefore with a start of surprise and annoyance that he was aroused from his reverie by the clatter of a machine gun and the vicious thud of bullets ripping through his machine. He levelled out and saw that he was in the middle of a swarm of Pfalz. Furiously, he threw the Bristol into a steep bank in order to display the white bar on his top plane. But either the Germans didn't see it or ignored it. 3 of them darted in, guns going, obviously with the intention of shooting him down. Biggles knew that something had gone wrong, but the present was no time to wonder what it was. He knew that the only thing he could do was to attempt to escape, either by trying to get back to the British lines or by making a dash for Zabala, which was nearer. He threw the Bristol into a spin with the object of getting it as near to the ground as possible and hedge-hopping, or rather rock-hopping, home. Looking back over his shoulder, he saw the Pfalz spinning down behind him. He pulled out 100 feet above the ground, but still eased the stick forward until his wheels were literally skimming the rocks, and swerving from side to side to throw the gunners off their mark, raced for Zabala. Behind him screamed the Pfalz like a pack of hounds after the hare. This sort of flying needs a cool head and steady nerves, and Biggles possessed both. He had to keep a sharp lookout in front for possible obstacles, and at the same time keep watch behind for the more daring pilots who sometimes took a chance and came in close. Whereupon he would turn at right angles and dash off on a new course, thereby upsetting their aim. As he approached Zabala, the German scouts doubled their efforts to stop him, obviously under the impression that the British two-seater intended to bomb their aerodrome. The consequence was that Biggles made a landing that was as spectacular as it was unusual. He throttled back, side-slipped off his last few feet of height, flattened out, and hurtled downwind across the sun-baked sandy aerodrome. His wheels touched, but he didn't stop. He saw German mechanics unashamedly sprinting for cover. 50 yards from the tarmac, Biggles risked applying a little rudder and aileron, although he clenched his teeth as he did so, fully expecting to hear the undercarriage collapse under the strain. A grinding jar proclaimed the Bristol's protest, but the wheels stood up to the terrific strain, and slowly the machine swung round until it was tearing straight along the tarmac in a cloud of dust. The Count and von Stahlhein, who'd heard the shouting and dashed out to see what was happening, just had time to throw themselves aside as the Bristol ran to a standstill, leaving a line of staring mechanics and swirling sand to mark its tempestuous course. The Count was white with anger.
What the devil do you think you're doing?
Biggles climbed out and pushed up his goggles.
With all respect to you, sir, I think that is the question that might well be put to the pilots of the Fauststaffel.
What do you mean?
They've done their best to shoot me down, sir. Look at my machine. Look at it!
The Count looked in surprise at the bullet holes in the wings and tail of the Bristol.
I don't understand this. Do you, Erich?
The scout pilots, who now arrived on the scene, pulled up short when they saw the pilot of the Bristol fighter. For a few moments, nobody spoke. Biggles glared at them.
Well, what about it?
One of the German pilots said something quickly. Von Faubourg started and turned to Biggles.
He says you've no markings on your wings.
No markings? Impossible.
He swung up and stood on the side of the fuselage from where he could see the whole of the top plane. He jumped down, eyes seeking the maker's number on the tail. And then he understood. It was not the number of his original machine.
He's quite right, sir. There is no white mark. But do not ask me to explain it, because I cannot. The only suggestion that I can offer is that a change of machines took place while I was at Kantara.
The Count was obviously unconvinced, but dismissed the matter with a wave of his hand.
Come along to my office, Brunau. I want you.
With von Stahlheim at his side, he disappeared into the fort. Biggles turned to follow, but before he went in, he turned to one of the Pfalz pilots.
How is it you happened to be where you were when I came along?
Yes, we were taking off. Von Stahlheim told us we should probably find some British machines there this morning.
I see. Thanks.
Then he followed the Count into his office. A curt question greeted him as he stepped into the room.
What happened over the other side?
I'm sorry, sir, but I was too late to do anything.
Too late?
Sheikh Haroun ibn Said, better known as El Sharif of the German intelligence staff, was tried by Field General Court-Martial this morning and sentenced to death for espionage. The sentence was carried out within an hour. I believe the British are making an official announcement about it tonight.
Ah, well, we have failed. But we did our best. What excuse did you give to account for your presence in Kantara?
The same as before. I said I was a delivery pilot. They're always coming and going, and nobody questioned it.
I see. Well, that is all for the present.
Biggles saluted and marched out of the room into the blazing sunshine. He went to where the pup was standing in a corner and put his hand on the engine. One touch told him all he needed to know. The engine was still warm.
I'm right. Yes, that's how he did it, the cunning beggar.
He walked back to his room and changed into his German uniform. The sound of an argument reached him, and looking out of the window, he noticed that a service tender had drawn up to discharge a single passenger who was in a heated discussion with the NCO in charge of the guard at the camp gate. It was clear that he was trying to obtain admission to the station, but he was in civilian clothes, and the NCO was not satisfied with his credentials. The man's suitcase stood on the ground, and as Biggles automatically read the name that was painted on its side in black letters, he drew in his breath sharply, while his fingers gripped the windowsill until his knuckles showed white through the tan. The name on the suitcase was L. Brunau. He now knew that he was in the tightest corner of his life. He slipped his German Mauser revolver into his pocket and hurried round to the gate. He waved the NCO aside and indicated that the newcomer was known to him and that he would accept responsibility for him. At the same time, he picked up the suitcase and held it close to his side so that the name could not be read. The real Brunau, for Biggles was in no doubt whatever as to the identity of the new arrival, wiped the perspiration from his face with a handkerchief.
Can you speak English by any chance? I'm afraid my German isn't very good.
A little, I understand Better than I speak, perhaps, yeah?
Oh, thank goodness. Then will you show me Count von Faubourg's office? I have an important message for him.
Yes, I will show you, but the Count has just gone away. You must have the thirst after your journey in the sun. I go to my room for a drink now. Perhaps you come. No?
Thanks. Yeah, I will. I can't stand this heat.
Biggles led the way to his room, where Brunau threw himself into a chair, while Biggles took from the cupboard 2 glasses, a siphon of soda water, and a bottle of brandy. The amount of brandy that he poured into Brunau's glass nearly made him blush, but Brunau didn't seem to notice it, so he added a little soda water and passed it over. His own glass he filled from the siphon, regretfully observing that he was forbidden alcohol by doctor's orders. Brunau drank deeply, like a thirsty man, as he probably was. He set down his empty glass, which Biggles casually refilled.
How long is the Count going to be, do you think?
He may be gone some time. Why? Is it something important, yeah?
Important? I should say it is. Cheers. Well, they've sent me all the way from Berlin rather than trust the telegraph or the postbag. Perhaps I shouldn't tell you. Look, keep this to yourself, but what would you say if I told you there was a spy here at Zabala?
There's always rumors about spies. Have another drink.
Thanks. Funny thing, you know, I'm not really German. But I went to Germany to offer my services. When I got there and told them my name, what do you think they did?
I'm no good at riddles.
They threw me in the clink. Cheerio.
Cheers.
They had the brass face to tell me that I was already serving in the Secret Service. Well, what would you say if anyone told you that, eh?
Impossible.
Was it? Ha! Well, that's all you know about it. They were right. Oh, yes, but I kicked up a proper stink and showed them my papers. Well, anyway, to make a long story short, they found that some skunk had got in under the canvas and was pretending to be me. Me! Well, what do you know about that?
Too bad.
Too bad? Is that all you've got to say about it? Well, don't you realize that this other fella is a spy? Well, I've got it in for him. Oh, yes, they believe. It's a fella named Bigglesworth. And he's here at Zabala.
Biggles poured out more brandy with a hand that shook slightly, for Brunau had raised his voice.
So you've come here to put an end to his little game, eh?
I want to see them shoot this skunk Bigglesworth, and I want to see him twitch when he gets a neck full of lead. That's what I want to see. That's what I've come here for. The people in Berlin decided to send a special messenger. They chose me, and here I am. Pretty good, eh?
Yeah. How about another drink?
The instant he said it, Biggles knew he'd gone too far. A look of suspicion darted into Brunau's bloodshot eyes, and the corners of his mouth came down ominously.
Say, what's the big idea? Are you trying to get me blotto? Sewn up? Huh? You sit there lacing me with brandy and letting me do the talking. Do you know this skate Bigglesworth? Well, you must, if you're stationed here. That's it. Is he a pal of yours, or...
The half-drunken man stared into Biggles' face. Then, with a look of hate and fear, he sprang to his feet, and grabbing the brandy bottle by the neck, swung it upwards. The table went over with a crash.
Cassio, you're...
Yes. I'm Bigglesworth. You dirty, traitorous rat.
Biggles dodged the bottle, and knowing that at all costs he must prevent him from shouting, grabbed Brunau's throat and choked off the cry that rose to his lips. His other hand gripped the wrist that still held the bottle, and a wave of fighting fury swept over him. The knowledge that the man was not only an enemy, but a traitor, fanned his rage to a searing, white-hot flame. But Brunau, with a sudden wrench, tore himself free and aimed a murderous blow with the bottle. He was a fraction of a second too slow, and Biggles sprang sideways like a cat. The force Brunau had put behind his blow almost overbalanced him, and before he could recover, Biggles brought the butt of his Mauser pistol down on the back of his head. Brunau swayed for a moment and then pitched forward over the table. Biggles stood rigid, listening, wondering fearfully if the noise of the struggle had been heard. His worst fears were realized. Slow, dragging footsteps were coming down the corridor, accompanied by the tap, tap of walking sticks. He literally flung Brunau under the bed and kicked his suitcase after him. He set the table on its legs, replaced the siphon in the bottle, and put one of the tumblers beside it. He pushed the Mauser under his pillow and flung himself down on the bed in an attitude of sleep. With every nerve tingling, he heard the footsteps stop outside. The door was opened quietly, and he knew that von Stahlhain was standing, looking into the room. How long the German stood there, he didn't know. When at length he risked a peek through his lashes, the door was closed again. The first thing must be to put Brunau where he could do no harm. But how? To murder a man in cold blood was unthinkable. To keep him hidden in his room, impossible. Somehow or other, he would have to get him into the Bristol and fly him over the lines. His first action was to retrieve the revolver and slip it into his pocket. Next, he pulled the unconscious man from under the bed, tied his hands and feet securely with a strip of towel, and gagged him. Then he pushed him back far under the bed and hurried down to the tarmac, feeling that time was everything. It was nearly dark, and the sergeant in charge looked at him in surprise when he asked that the two-seater be stood out on the tarmac in readiness for a flight.
I understand I'm to do some night flying soon, and I want some practice. Just stand her outside. There's no need for you to wait, and it may be some time before I take off. I shall be able to manage by myself.
He breathed a sigh of relief as the mechanics obeyed his orders unquestioningly. As he started off back towards his room to fetch the body, he saw von Stahlhain hurrying along the tarmac to intercept him. The German hailed him.
Ah, there you are. I've been looking for you. I came up to your room, but you seemed to be... Well, I thought it best not to disturb you.
I had a drink or two, and I must have dropped off to sleep.
That's all right. But I've got a little job I want you to do for me, if you will.
Certainly. What is it?
We've just had a prisoner brought in, and he's as close as an oyster. He won't say a word, just sulks. We want to try the old trick on him. You know, to see if he knows anything worth knowing. Will you slip on your British uniform, and we'll march you in as if you were another prisoner? You know the idea. He'll probably unloosen a bit if you start talking to him.
To Biggles, this interruption of his plans at such a crucial moment was unnerving, but he could not demur. So he went to his room, and after ascertaining that Brunau was still as he had left him, he changed quickly and went along to the fort, where he found von Stahlhain waiting for him with an escort of 2 soldiers armed with rifles and fixed bayonets. Biggles took his place between the escort, who marched him ceremoniously through the gate of the detention camp and escorted him to a room in which a light was burning. The door was unlocked, and he was pushed roughly inside, and the door closed behind him. But he remained standing, staring unbelievably at a British officer who sat dejectedly on a wooden stool near the far side of the room. It was Algy. It would be hard to say who of the two were more shaken, Biggles or Algy. Algy sprang up to speak, but Biggles laid a warning finger on his lips.
Be careful. They may be listening. Hello. It looks as if we're both in the same boat. How long have you been here?
They got me this afternoon.
He nodded to indicate that he grasped the reason of her Biggles' warning. Then began a double-sided conversation, one carried on in a natural way, as one would expect between 2 British officers who found that they were brothers in misfortune. The other consisted of a whispered dialogue, in which Biggles learnt that Algy's engine had failed flying over to Zabala with a message about the capture of El Sharif. This went on for about half an hour, during which time Biggles racked his brains for a means of overcoming the difficulties and dangers closing in on him. What with Algy being a prisoner, Brunau tied up in his room, and von Stahlhain already suspicious, he was appalled by the immediate prospect.
I can't tell you all about it now, Algy. They'll come back in a minute to fetch me in order that I can report on what you've been saying. After I've gone, stand by for anything. I've got to get you away, and I can't worry about anything else now until that's done. In fact, if this is the end of the whole business, I shan't burst into tears. I've had enough of it. Be careful. Here they come. Don't worry. I shan't be far away.
Taking up the role he was playing, he looked over his shoulder as the door opened and the escort entered.
Come, you.
Cheerio, old fellow. I may see you later, perhaps.
As soon as he was outside, all pretense was abandoned. And as he walked briskly towards the fort, he heard an aeroplane start up and taxi from the Halberstadt sheds towards the far side of the aerodrome. He turned and walked boldly through the main door of the fort, and went on to the far end of the corridor to the back door of the building. He went through, and closing the door quietly behind him, made his way swiftly to his room, where, after satisfying himself that Brunau was still unconscious, he changed into his German uniform and hurried to the prison camp. There he beckoned to the NCO in charge of the guard.
Bring the officer prisoner. Hauptmann von Stahlhain wishes to speak with him.
The NCO called the escort to attention, marched them to Algy's door, and called him out. Biggles didn't so much as glance at him as he walked back towards the main entrance of the fort, with the prisoner and his escort following. Telling the guards to wait, he signalled Algy to follow, led the way into the corridor, and straight on to the back of the building. Outside, no one was in sight.
Come on.
With Algy following closely behind, they sprinted to the side of the building and entered Biggles' room.
I've got a Bristol standing on the tarmac. You're going to fly it back, but you've got to take a passenger.
You mean you?
No.
Who?
Brunau. The real Brunau. He turned up today.
My gosh, where is he now?
Here, under the bed. Help me drag him out while he's still unconscious. I'm afraid I socked him on the head rather hard, but he asked for it. Get him to the MO when you get back. Don't for goodness sake let him escape. Now do exactly what I tell you to. Slip this German tunic on. Make haste, never mind your own. If we meet anyone, don't speak. I'm going to put on my overalls, but I shall be recognized, so it doesn't matter much about me. Got that clear?
Absolutely.
Come on, then. Bear a hand to get Brunau down to the Bristol. If we're spotted, I'll try to bluff. But if there is an alarm, leave Brunau and make a dash for the machine. You ready?
Quite.
Then off we go.
They gathered up the limp figure and set off towards the hangar where the British machines were housed. They reached it without seeing a soul, and to Biggles' infinite relief, the Bristol was still standing as he'd left it.
Got it.
Between them, they got the unconscious man into the back seat and fastened the safety belt around him.
Well, hold hard. What are you going to do?
That's all right. Off you go.
And leave you here? Not on your life.
Don't sit there arguing, you fool. Someone will come along presently. Do as you're told. I shall be all right.
I don't like leaving you. Why not dump Brunau and let's fly back together?
Because when I start on a job, I like to finish it.
What do you mean?
A little unfinished business I have to attend to. Like, why does a Halberstadt wait each night at the far side of the airfield, and who is the mysterious passenger that boards it?
But how will you get away from here and land over our lines?
Don't worry, if I have any problems, I'll use the other British plane here, the Pup. Now, off you go.
All right, but be careful. So long.
Biggles swung the propeller, the Bristol's engine sputtered into life, and the plane taxied, ready for takeoff. Biggles slipped away through the shadows to the hangar where the Pup was normally parked. He peered through the partly open doors and saw to his horror that the Pup was dismantled, obviously halfway through a major service. He heard the roar of the Bristol's engines as it took off, and then with alarm he heard the sound of running footsteps. He flung himself to the ground in the dark shadow cast by the hangar, and cautiously looking up, saw the station adjutant standing on the tarmac, looking about with a puzzled air. From his manner, it was clear that he'd heard the British machine take off, and had hurried down to see what was going on. This was something he'd not bargained for. He had even more cause for alarm when a minute or two later, the adjutant was joined by von Stahlhain. He had a dressing gown thrown over his shoulders. He too had evidently heard the Bristol take off, and had hurried along to ascertain the cause. He said something to the Feldwebel, who presently returned with the sergeant of the flight, to whom Biggles had given instructions regarding the preparation of the Bristol. A crisp conversation ensued, and Biggles guessed that the NCO was explaining the reason why Lieutenant Brunau was flying. Biggles lingered no longer. The discovery of the dismantled pup left him no choice of action. He stepped out of his hiding place and set off towards the far side of the aerodrome, and gave a little exclamation of satisfaction when he saw a Halberstadt standing just where he expected to find it. The pilot was in the front seat with the engine ticking over. Biggles walked up quickly, put his foot in the fuselage stirrup, swung himself up beside the pilot and tapped him on the shoulder.
The Count wants you urgently. There's a change of plans. I've been sent out to relieve you. You're to go back at once. I'm to fly tonight.
To his unutterable relief, the man climbed out of his seat and stood beside the self-appointed pilot.
What is the course tonight? They told me, and I think I remember, but I'd like to confirm it.
Jebel Hind, Galada, Wadi Barud, Pauta.
Where do you usually land?
You may not have to land, but you will know in the air about that.
Thanks, sir. You'd better get back now.
Biggles buckled on his flying cap, pulled his goggles low over his face, removed the spare joystick from the back seat, and took his place in the front cockpit. Minutes passed by slowly. But suddenly his muscles tightened as a tall figure in Arab costume loomed up in the darkness, and without saying a word, swung up into the rear cockpit. Biggles felt a light tap on the shoulder. With a smile, he eased the throttle open and held the stick forward. The Mercedes engine roared. The Halberstadt skimmed over the sand and soared upwards in a steep, climbing turn. For 20 minutes, Biggles flew on a straight course for Jebel Hind, the first landmark, crouching well forward in the cockpit and taking care not to turn his head to left or right, which might give von Stahlheim a view of his profile. It was unnerving to know that an enemy whom he could not see was sitting a couple of feet behind him. The lifeless, rocky country around Jebel Hind loomed up ahead, and the machine bumped once or twice as the change in the terrain affected the atmosphere. A solitary searchlight stabbed a tapering finger of white light into the starry sky some distance ahead, and he knew he was approaching the British lines. He roared on through the night till he reached Galada, and continued on a course that would bring him to the Wadi Barud, the next landmark. But the expected tap on the shoulder did not come, and he roared on through the starlit sky. The edge of the moon crept up above the rim of the desert, and still he flew on, heading towards Pauta, his next landmark. Then far ahead over his port wing appeared a little cluster of yellow lights that he knew was the British aerodrome of Kantara. He eased the nose of the machine a trifle towards it. Would von Stahlheim notice the move? Apparently not, for nothing happened. Again he touched the rudder bar lightly and brought his nose in a straight line with the aerodrome. Tingling with excitement, he held onto his course, watching the aerodrome lights creeping slowly nearer. Suddenly, he was in the middle of the aerodrome. A glance at the luminous altimeter showed the needle resting on the 5,000 feet mark. It was now or never. With his left hand, he cut the throttle. His left foot kicked the rudder bar, while with his right hand, he flung the joystick over to the left and then dragged it back into his right thigh. To anyone in the back seat, the result would have been terrifying, as indeed he intended it to be. The machine lurched over heavily, swung down, and then plunged earthward in a vicious spin. At 1,000 feet, he pulled out of the spin, and then pushed his left wing down in a vertical sideslip. Struts and wires howled in protest as the machine dropped like a stone. Only at the very last moment did he level out, make a swift S-turn, and glide in to a fast wheel landing. As his wheels touched the ground, he flicked off the ignition switch with his left hand, while with his right he felt for the Mauser. The tail skid dropped, dragged a few yards, and the machine stopped. Biggles made a flying leap to the ground, revolver in hand.
Stick up your hands, von Stahlheim.
There was no reply.
Come on. Stick 'em up. I've got you covered. One false move and it's your last. I mean it.
Still no reply. Biggles couldn't see the German.
Come on! There's no use crouching down there on the floor. In 5 seconds, I shall start shooting.
With his revolver ready, he put his foot in the fuselage stirrup and stood up so that he could see inside the back cockpit. One glance was enough. It was empty. He leaned weakly against the trailing edge of the lower wing, and a sudden feeling of nausea swept over him. The reaction after the terrific strain of the last few minutes, when every nerve had been keyed up to breaking point, was almost overwhelming. The unexpected anticlimax nearly upset his mental balance. Then he saw that a British mechanic was covering him with a rifle.
Hands up there, Jerry!
Oh, it's all right. I brought you a nice German plane as a souvenir.
The mechanic stared at the machine and back at Biggles. And then a number of officers relieved him of any further responsibility in the matter. Major Raymond was amongst them, and Biggles took him gently by the arm.
Is Algy back?
Yes, he was in the mess having his dinner when I came out.
Has he told you?
Yes, he told me all about it.
And Brunau?
Yes, we've got him where he can do no harm. You better trot along to the mess and get something to eat, and then come and see me in my tent.
Right you are, sir.
Biggles started off in the direction of the distant officers' mess. An hour later, Biggles reclined in a long cane chair in Major Raymond's tent. The Major sat at his desk with his chin resting in the palms of his hands. Algy sat on the other side of him, listening.
Well, there it is. It was the biggest shock I have ever had in my life. It was also the biggest disappointment. I'll tell you straight, sir. I could have burst into tears when I landed and found von Stahlheim wasn't there. I couldn't believe it, and that's a fact. But there's no doubt about what he did. When he was over the place where he wanted to get to, he just stepped over the side with a parachute, and I can guess where it happened. I remember an extra bad bump. He's been getting into our lines like that all the time. He's somewhere over this side of the lines, floating about in his alley barber outfit. How are we going to find him? That's what I want to know. By the way, Algy, how did you get on with Brunau?
Right as rain, no trouble at all. I flew straight back and landed here.
Where is he now?
In the Kantara prison camp, in solitary confinement.
What are you going to do with him, sir?
He'll be tried by General Court-Martial. But what about this fellow von Stahlheim? That's far more important.
I was coming to that. I think we can lay him by the heels, but I shall want some help.
What sort of help?
Personal assistance from somebody who knows the country well, and the Arabs. Major Stern, for instance.
Major Stern? Well, he's a difficult fellow to get hold of. He's all over the place, and we seldom know just where he is. Won't anyone else do?
I'd prefer Stern. It's only right that as he caught El Sharif, he should have a hand in the affair. I suggest that a message be sent out that his presence is urgently required at General Headquarters in connection with plans for the British advance. So will he please report as quickly as possible? That should bring him in.
And suppose I can arrange it. Where would you like to see Stern?
At General Headquarters, if possible. It would save him coming here. If you'll get the message out, I'll go to Headquarters with Lacey and wait until he comes. Perhaps you'd like to come along too.
The General isn't going to be pleased if you waste his time.
I shan't be pleased if I waste my own. I've been risking my neck, so he can hardly object to giving up a few minutes of his time. All right, sir. Let's start moving.
The pearly glow of a new day spread slowly over the air headquarters of the British Expeditionary Force in Palestine, and awoke two officers who were sleeping uncomfortably in deck chairs.
Looks as if Stern isn't coming, Algy. It's getting light.
You're right. In which case, we shall have to try and find the wily von Stahlheim ourselves.
A pity. Well, it can't be helped, though I expect the General will be peeved if he's been waiting about all night. Yeah?
The General wishes to see you, sir, in his room immediately.
The General looked up wearily from his desk as they entered. Several staff officers and Major Raymond were there.
Which of you is Bigglesworth?
I am, sir.
Will you have the goodness to explain what all this means? Major Raymond has told me of the excellent work you've done in Palestine, and I am prepared to take a broad view, but I am very tired, and this business all seems very pointless.
I believe it was on your intervention that stay of execution was granted in the death sentence promulgated in connection with Sheikh Harun ibn Said, otherwise the spy, El Sharif.
Frankly, Bigglesworth, we are prepared to give officers on special duty from the airboard a lot of rope, but there is a limit as to how far we can allow them to go.
Quite, sir. I hope to repay you for your consideration.
How?
By saving you from the mental discomfort you would surely have suffered when you discovered that you had shot an innocent man, sir.
Innocent man? What are you talking about?
The Sheikh Haroun ibn Said is not El Sharif, sir.
Good heavens, man, what do you mean?
What I say, sir. Sheikh Haroun is what he has always claimed to be, a good friend of the British. By causing him to be arrested and shot as a spy, the German agent who handled the job hoped to achieve two ends: to remove a powerful sheikh who was loyal to British arms, and at the same time lull you into a sense of false security by leading you to believe that you had put an end to the notorious activities of the spy, El Sharif. Sheikh Haroun ibn Said, in his ignorance of Western matters, was easily induced to wear a German Secret Service ring and carry on his person incriminating documents without having the slightest idea of what they meant. In short, he was induced to adopt the personality of El Sharif.
Good grief. By whom?
By El Sharif, sir.
Are you sure of this?
I am, sir.
So, El Sharif is still at large.
He is, sir.
Who is the man whom you flew into the British lines last night, this Hauptmann Erich von Stahlheim? Has he any connection with El Sharif?
He has, sir.
What is it?
He's the same man, sir. El Sharif.
Why did you not tell me this before?
Because, sir, I do not mean to be disrespectful, but German agents have ears in the very highest places. Even in your headquarters, sir.
I find it hard to believe that. Still, this story of yours puts a very different complexion on things. Von Stahlheim, alias El Sharif, is still at large, and you want Stern to help you run him to earth, is that it?
That is correct, sir.
Who is it?
Major Stern is here, sir.
Good. Ask him to come up here at once.
Biggles, after a nod to Algy, stepped back against the far wall. The next moment he was watching with a fascinated interest one of the most talked-of men in the Middle East. A man whose knowledge of native law was proverbial, and who could disguise himself to deceive even the Arabs themselves. Even now he was dressed in flowing Arab robes, but he raised his hand in military salute.
Hello, Stern. Here you are, then. Good to see you. You got my message?
Yes, sir. I was anxious to know what it was about.
It's this confounded fellow, El Sharif. It seems that there's been some mistake. The fellow you brought in was not El Sharif at all.
Not El Sharif? What nonsense! If he isn't El Sharif, then who is?
You are, I think. Don't move, von Stahlheim.
The man known as Major Stern spun round on his heel and looked into the muzzle of Biggles' revolver. He lifted eyes that were glittering with hate to Biggles' face.
Ah, so I was right.
You were, and so was I.
Von Stahlheim slowly raised hands. As they drew level with the top of his burnous, he tore the garment off with a swift movement and hurled it straight into Biggles' face. At the same time, he leapt for the door. Algy barred his way, but he turned like a hare and sprang at the window with Algy at his heels. Biggles dared not risk shooting for fear of hitting Algy or the staff officers who tried to intercept the German. But they were too late. Biggles saw a flash of white as von Stahlheim went through the window like a bird. They all raced to the door and looked out. An Arab, bent double over a magnificent horse, was streaking through the village street, then round the corner of the road that led to Kantara Aerodrome.
My car! My car!
The general roared. His chauffeur started the big Crossley tourer and took his place at the wheel. The general jumped in beside him, and the others squeezed into the back seats.
Faster, man, faster!
The car dry skidded round the corner where von Stahlheim had last been seen, and the open road lay before them. A mile away, the tents of Kantara gleamed pink and gold in the rays of the rising sun.
You'll beat us, damn it! You'll take one of those machines just starting up!
On the tarmac, a Bristol fighter was warming up the engine while its pilot and observer finished a cup of tea outside the mess some 30 or 40 yards away. Von Stahlheim swerved like a greyhound towards the machine. The pilot and observer watched his unusual actions in astonishment. They made no attempt to stop him. Von Stahlheim pulled up with a jerk, and in a twinkling of an eye he'd pulled away the chocks from under the wheels and had taken a flying leap into the cockpit. The engine roared, and the Bristol began to move over the ground.
Oh, we've lost him! Quick, go to the Archie battery!
The anti-aircraft battery was only 100 yards down the road. A subaltern ran forward and saluted.
Get that machine!
The general pointed at the Bristol that was now 1,000 feet in the air and climbing swiftly towards the German lines. Within 5 seconds, the first gun had roared its brass-coated shell at the British machine. It went wide. The officer corrected the aim, and a shell burst 50 yards in front of the two-seater. Another word of command, and the 4 guns began firing salvos as fast as the gunners could feed them. Tiny sparks of yellow flame, followed by mushrooming clouds of white smoke, appeared round the Bristol. The pilot began to swerve from side to side as he realized his danger. Biggles knew from bitter experience just what von Stahlheim was going through. He felt almost sorry for him. A shell burst almost under the fuselage, and the machine rocked.
He's hit!
No, sir. It was only the bump of the explosion, I think.
Another shell burst almost between the wings of the Bristol, and its nose jerked up spasmodically.
He's hit now, sir.
A silence fell on the little group of watchers as the Bristol lurched, recovered, lurched again, and then fell off on its wing into a dizzy, earthward plunge. Then it disappeared behind a distant hill. A hush of tense expectancy fell, as every man held his breath and strained his ears for the sound that he knew would come. It came. The sinister but unmistakable sound of an aeroplane hitting the ground. Biggles drew a deep breath.
Well, that's that.
That evening, a little party dined quietly in the headquarters mess. It consisted of the General, Major Raymond, Algy, and Biggles.
Did you first suspect that von Stahlheim and El Sharif were one and the same?
It's hard to say, sir. I felt from the very beginning that von Stahlheim was more than he appeared to be on the surface. He was so suspicious of any stranger that came to the camp, and a man is only suspicious when he has something to be suspicious about. I knew something was going on behind the scenes, and when I saw him dressed as an Arab, well, that seemed to be the answer to the question. He never appeared in that garb in daylight, and only a few people at Zabala knew what he was doing. He didn't want them to know. The Count knew all about it, of course he had to, and I should say that he wasn't too pleased about it, because being vain and inefficient, it annoyed him to know that a subordinate had 10 times the amount of brain that he had. Leffens was, I think, the one man von Stahlheim really trusted. He used to fly him over the lines until I killed him, and after that he used Mayer. He never knew what happened to Leffens, but I've got a feeling that he tipped Leffens off to shoot me down if he got a chance, and that was why he daren't make much of a song when he found the bullet. I'd already thought a lot about Stern, and there were 2 things that put me on the right track there. First, the shadow on the tent, and secondly, the fact that someone, obviously in sympathy with the Germans, arranged my escape. Who could it be? Who had access to British posts? Once the germ was in my mind, I was always on the lookout for a clue. That's why I went to von Stahlheim's room. I was hoping to find a British uniform or something of the sort. Then there was the British hat in Mayer's machine. It may sound easy to put 2 and 2 together now, but would you have believed me, sir, if I'd come to you and said that Major Stern was von Stahlheim? I doubt it. Von Stahlheim's scheme for the capture of El Sharif was a clever piece of work, there's no denying it. But he made one little slip, took one risk, would perhaps be nearer the truth, and it gave the game away. It was what I saw in your tent, Major.
What was it?
The ring. Those rings are few and far between. They knew that one of those rings found on the sheikh would be sufficient evidence to hang him. There was only one available. It was Leffens, and I recognized it.
But von Stahlheim sent you over to try to rescue El Sharif.
He wanted me to confirm that El Sharif had been arrested. Anyway, he had nothing to lose. Suppose I'd managed to rescue El Sharif, or rather, Sheikh Haroun. The Huns would have been delighted to have him in their hands.
Yes, I quite see that. and by reporting that he'd been shot, you led him to think that we had been completely taken in.
Exactly, sir. He never trusted me. He was the only one of them who spotted that things started going wrong from the moment I arrived. First of all, the waterworks were blown up, then Leffens failed to return, then the Arab raid went wrong. Mayer crashes and gets his leg smashed. Oh, no, sir. He wasn't going to believe this was just a run of bad luck. Something was radically wrong somewhere, and he knew it. And he would have felt happier if he could have got me out of the way. That's why he tried to get me shot down, the day I came over here to confirm that you had captured El Sharif.
What did he do?
He followed me over in the pup, dressed as Major Stern. He simply walked along the tarmac, told the flight sergeant to put my machine in the shed, and put another in its place. One which, of course, had no distinguishing mark on the top plane. Then von Stahlheim went back and sent out the Pfalz crowd to intercept me on the way home. I knew things were rapidly coming to a head, and that's why I played a big stake to end it one way or the other. But all the same, I thought I'd bungled things badly when I landed here and found he wasn't in the back seat of the Halberstadt. I never even thought of his going over the side by parachute.
And what do you propose to do now, Bigglesworth?
I'm going to submit an application to you, sir, to post me back to my old unit, number 266 Squadron, in France. And I hope you'll put it through, sir.
I hoped you'd stay out here, but so be it. I can't refuse, and I need hardly say how grateful I am for what you've done during your tour of duty in the Middle East. The success of the British Army in Palestine may have rested on you alone. Goodbye, and good luck.
The general watched them go, and then turned to his aide-de-camp.
If we had a few more officers of that type, the war would have been over long ago.